And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
Attention, roll call. What's up, everybody? Good morning. Eric's not going to be able to join us this morning, so just asking everybody if you guys could say a prayer for Derek. Derek wasn't doing well last night. Eric wanted to take this time to be with his family. So, our thoughts and prayers out to the Dim family. And we're praying for a miracle at this point. So, Eric had called me this morning. He said he was up all night. So, he said he's sorry he couldn't make it, but obviously family comes first. So, appreciate all you guys for joining us this morning. Marlon, what's going on, brother?
Hey, nothing much, bro. Good morning, chat. If you can put your thoughts and prayers with Derek and the Dim family. It's a rough time right now. So, but I hope everyone is doing all right today, and hope everyone has a happy Friday. Otherwise, got a lot to discuss, so let's get at it.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for joining this morning. So, I'm not gonna lie. I know Frankie Palagucci. Frankie is NYPD cop. He had just filed a EEO complaint against Civil Rights Title VII against the job for a drug test that the NYPD is saying he failed. I think drug testing in the NYPD, and we titled this episode "Not So Random Drug Testing," and the reason is because we're not stupid, and we know that thing gets flouted often, and the drug tests aren't so random. We all have our own experiences with being dole tested. We all have the same thing that raises your eyebrows. You're like, wait, is that I randomly got selected 7 times in a year, and every time I randomly got selected, you shaved the legs on my hair as well as made me pee in a cup? That's pretty weird. Oh, and then the one time I complained about it, I said, you're going to send me again? You go, I'm going again. I'm going again in 1 year, 7 times. I'm going an 8th time. I complain about it, and the test gets rescheduled. And I'm like, oh, wait, we could reschedule a test? I didn't know that. And that's a true story, and that actually happened to me. So I kind of wanted to deep dive into this. Again, a lot of stuff circumstantial, and that is the fault of the NYPD because what Eric Sanders alleges in his lawsuit is that, and it's not, and we know it to be true with all of when it comes out with all of the COVID litigation, is that the NYPD is unwilling to turn over discovery. They're unwilling to turn over stuff that if they're saying that this isn't accurate, this isn't right, we didn't discriminate against Marlon, we didn't discriminate against John. Okay, show us the proof. Show us exactly who you denied and who you didn't. And the same holds true when it comes to the testing, right? So people have questions how the testing is. Testing's done through a third party. People have questions about what, rightfully so, right? If you failed the drug test, you're going to want to know exactly what that third party lab's doing. But the NYPD is keeping that confidential, under wraps. And I don't know if you know, Marlon, but I myself know people who have failed dole tests, sued, gotten their job back, and are still today active members of the NYPD. What are your thoughts about the random drug testing in the NYPD?
Yeah, the random. Yeah, so this is going to be a very interesting discussion because there's a lot to this. And for those of you watching right now, Eric Sanders, the attorney, put out a press release about a couple of days ago. And if you can get to Google and pull it up, it's going to be great to follow along. But there's a lot here. And believe it or not, when I was doing my research, I actually found an article from 1998, which brought up the same points that Eric does in his press release, and basically the underpinnings of his case against the city. So there's a lot going on here, and there's a lot that was questionable about not only the test but the framework of their random tests from the get-go. and it's just a shame that these issues have been festering since the late 90s, and it's only now becoming it's only now really going to court, and that's largely because of the efforts that were done in Boston. So there's a lot here, and those of you on the job, you already know that this entire thing was always shady. I never received any sort of drug test when I was on the job until I got into Intel, and then I had two in a 2-week period. So I mean, what are the odds of that? Yeah, for something that's supposed to be random. So there's a lot to follow here, and you're gonna see that this goes far back.
So I think the first thing to point out is, right, like, we say everything's arbitrary and capricious in New York City, especially under Eric Adams. This isn't something that Eric Adams created, but it's something that he had the ability to fix, and he did it, like everything else that fell under him, right? So I think it's fair to note that there is a difference between people who carry firearms and professions that don't. I don't think there's much of a difference, right? Because if you're going to tell me you don't test teachers for marijuana and you don't test firefighters for marijuana, should you test cops for marijuana? I think the dangers are pretty similar with all of them, with not testing them. If there is a like a psychedelic episode or something where someone actually loses their mind as a result of using it's labeled as a marijuana is labeled almost as a psychedelic, so that it could be mind altering. And I think the more that it has went away from an organic plant, I think, when we've seen these other forms of THCs, these gummies, all this stuff that's coming out, you see people have these psychotic episodes, right, from the use of what used to be called marijuana. Now I want to say it's the use of THC or synthetic marijuana. So we've seen that. I mean, I've seen that with people who've never had an issue in their life with anything, high earners, people big in business. They eat a gummy, they snap out. Next thing you know, the wife's calling the 911, and she's like, I don't know, my husband's under the covers. He got the thing over his head. So, I mean, like, we've never had that happen before, but now that this is a reality, like, right, marijuana is legal in New York City. Eric Adams celebrated it. So it's a reality that your child's teacher may be using marijuana. It's a reality that a firefighter or a paramedic may be showing up to your house high. This is a reality that could happen in New York City. So is it fair, first off, in your opinion, to differentiate, I don't know why I can't talk today, but differentiate NYPD cops from those employees?
Well, I don't think it is, but this city has a habit of, let's just put it this way. There's a higher standard of and greater expectations of police officers amongst pretty much every civil servant worker in the city and in general. Okay, people expect more from a cop, but think of it, in a lot of ways it just doesn't make sense, because if a firefighter is showing up to work stoned and he's operating a fire truck, do we want that guy driving a giant rig down a block at a high speed trying to get to the emergency when he's like off his rocker? I mean, it doesn't make sense if you dig into the issue, and but it's completely ignored, and they focus on cops only. When I've heard plenty of stories of firefighters who use marijuana or come in buzzed, and no one ever really talks about that. So it's very much unfair, and it's very disjointed. But disjointed is something that's part of course for the NYPD and for the rest of the city when it comes to the NYPD.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I could see, listen, I could kind of see the difference between saying, okay, well, you carry a gun, you have arrest authority, you have lives in your hands. But I mean, I think the same's true when you look at a teacher, when you look at a firefighter, when you look at an EMS worker. You have lives in your hand. That happened a DOT worker. You're driving some huge monster truck where you're paving roads. You know, I mean, an MTA bus driver. I mean, they're not technically city employees, the state, but I mean, I think the same's true for all of us, that we have lives in our hands. But let's just say, okay, let's just go with that. All right, you have a firearm. You have a firearm. You have arrest authority. Okay, fair enough. You have a greater responsibility and you're held to a higher standard. All right, I'll buy it. But now when we look at fire marshals who have that same arrest authority, when you look at other people who are peace officer status in New York City that work directly for New York City, they aren't held to the same drug testing standards as the NYPD is either. And to me, that shows a huge flaw and completely hypocritical stance in New York City's opinion. It's like, we only need to ensure that NYPD people are drug tested in this manner, or why isn't it across the board that everyone that carries a gun is drug tested in this manner? And that's something that's also arbitrary. And like, how does that happen? You know, how does a New York City sheriff go through a different testing policy than an NYPD cop? Shouldn't they be all one and the same? Shouldn't a fire marshal be one and the same? You're in a different status, right? You have great power comes great responsibility, right? You have that great power. Why is that not equal then? You know, like, what are your thoughts about that? Like the fact that there's different standards all over the board for those that carry guns when it comes to drug testing in New York City. They're all city employees, but yet held to different standards.
Well, you know, also, you know, we're fond of criticizing the job here, right? But you know, we criticize the leadership, and you know, it's not the problem of the workers on the ground. It's a lot of the problems come from leadership and poor decision making that goes on 1PP. So I'm saying this because the city themselves knows that their policies are just all over the place, and they know that the NYPD, that like the NYPD is such a competent agency, right? The boots on the ground are so competent at getting the job done with little resources, with poor leadership at the top, that right now almost all the candidates are proposing to effectively pull in other departments under the purview of the NYPD. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I'm basically saying that the city knows all of these problems exist, but they know the NYPD is so good, right, that they hold higher expectations of us, and now they're trying to fold everything under us to do under, like Adams has the Q stat and Q teams, and which is effectively rolling every quality of life issue that's handled by other departments under a task force that's led by the NYPD. So what I'm saying is I think the city knows that a lot of this goes on in other agencies, and they've basically thrown their hands up and say, okay, well, there's nothing we can really do about it. We're going to leave this policy as it is, probably also because of those unions also vote Democrat, or they're heavy voting blocks for the Democrats, right? But the city is effectively throwing its hands up and saying, well, in order to get stuff done in the city, we're going to have to put it under the most competent agency in the city, the one that gets it done despite all the other stuff, and the only one which really has a policy for this stuff. Whereas, you know, we wash our hands of all the other agencies who you know, maybe coming in buzzed or still smoking weed or on the job or whatever. We're gonna throw our hands up because the NYPD can get it done. So we're gonna hold them to that higher standard. So
yeah, I mean, but like the thing is, like, I remember when this whole policy got taken down, you know, and it was like, I remember being furious because immediately it came out that FDNY was no longer going to test for marijuana.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, oh, so that's what you guys traded? You traded your integrity so that you could use marijuana? Like, that's what you celebrate? And they're like, we're not getting drug tested no more. I was like, oh, but the government could stick you whatever you want. So you shouldn't get drug tested because you might not want to know what's in your body. Like, so, I remember being furious and we put that out. And then quickly the city was trying to hush those. They're like, no, those are rumors. That's not true. But it is true. They don't drug test for marijuana. And I mean, I see a huge hypocrisy in all of it. It's like, wait, so it's okay for the average citizen to utilize these products that are being sold on New York City streets, that it's okay to utilize this. It's okay to market to our children. It's okay to do all these things, but it's not okay for cops. So maybe it's not okay. There's a rise in mental illness. There's a rise in homelessness. Anybody see a correlation here? Anybody might want to go back to that time, how we were faring, how the hospitals were faring, how many emergency room trips were happening for all this stuff. Anybody want to talk about that? While Eric Adams is celebrating how his city smells like a car that kids hotboxed a week ago and never opened the windows. Entire city smells disgusting. Celebrating it. Oh, I see everybody's utilizing the law. So I mean, to me, I see the huge hypocrisy in it. But again, I could understand. All right, you have a gun. You're held to a higher standard. But again, you look at New York City sheriffs, you look at the fire marshals, and there's a few other jobs where you're carrying a gun, you're a city employee. And guess what? They're not testing you for marijuana. So it's pretty safe to say that they're not worried about you utilizing marijuana. Right? If you're not being tested for it. So why the concern only for NYPD cops? Why is it arbitrary? Why is it capricious? Pat Donahue, he said the department lives to have a certain level of vagueness so they can have flexibility during disciplinary decision making. And I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And what that is, it's power. It's arbitrary and capricious. Again, like I stated here, I have friends who have failed random dull tests. They failed them. They got a lawyer. They fought against the decision. They had doctors come and testify on their behalf. They won the case. As of today, they're active members of the NYPD working. Not a blip on the radar. Some have been since promoted. Just based on that fact alone. Shouldn't the department have redone how they operate and how they drug test? Just on that fact alone. You drug tested someone, they pop positive, a court overturned your decision. Why is anyone still being subject to the scrutiny now? Why is anybody? Like, shouldn't you have found a different form of testing if your test was proved faulty in a court of law? Why for years? And it's not like it happened one time. It's happened multiple times in different generations over the course of years, but yet the same procedures are still in place.
Yeah, it was brought up from the beginning. The hair testing was made department wide around 98, and around the same time there was an officer who was terminated for initially testing positive, and he was later rehired because when they went to retest the sample, it was proven a false positive. So there was issues even back then, and instead of finding alternative means, the job persisted with the same system. And I'm reading this article from 1998, and it's like, we tend to think sometimes that a lot of the problems of the job they exist now. But when I read this article, I'm like, geez, in a lot of ways, a lot of the nonsense still existed back then, before we even got on the job. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we're gonna keep touching back on here is how it's a union failure, and what I don't understand is how this issue wasn't being litigated in court by the unions before Eric Sanders, and especially since the Boston PD, who used to use the same firm, Psychmedics, to do the testing. There were some officers in Boston who terminated for the same issue, and they brought a case, and it went to the federal district court, and they won. And Boston no longer uses that firm. They no longer use that method. And this was back in 2022. So it's now been 3 years. Where were our unions in that time frame? You know, where were they since the 1990s, the late 90s, and where were they since in that 3 years? Where in court testimony, you know, that method of testing was disproven. So it's I think this goes back to the unions, John, and the continuous failures of the unions. And they even now, where's the press release? You know, it's been how many? When did Eric Sanders release this? What, the 18th of April? So it's almost been a week now. Where's the press release from any of the unions? Are any of the unions paying attention here? I mean, Eric Sanders has all the ammunition here to win in court. So why aren't you saying something? This case has already gone to court in Boston, and the cops won it. So what do you think is going to happen here?
Look what Mike Smith's saying here. 18-0 versus Dole, right? But you went to the Super Bowl, Mike. You went to the Super Bowl 18 times randomly. And guess what could have happened? You could have lost. You know, every time I never used drugs. I was scared to death of this job. Scared to death of it. I bought protein once. I found out there was like hemp in it. I'm like, oh, I can't take that. You know, giving away protein that I bought. I didn't take anything. Like I really didn't take. I just started now. At 44, I started taking supplements. I started taking creatine. Like that's it. Like I started taking creatine. And I started taking magnesium. Other than that, I don't take anything else. But like the whole time on the job, I never took anything. And yet every time I went for adult, I was scared to death. I was like, what if I ate some? What if this? What if that? What if I shook this guy's hand? He had something on his hand. I don't know, like a million different things, because you literally go into the Super Bowl and you know the testing's flawed. And you know that there's people that might have an axe to grind with you. You know that somebody might want to see you get pop on a dole and get thrown off the job. They don't like you. They think your shit doesn't stink. They don't even know you. They never spoke to you. They just seen you from a distance and don't like you. A lot of jealousy in the New York City Police Department. A lot of jealousy from men who are out of shape, who never lifted a weight in their lives, who don't eat right, who drink every night, and they don't understand how a man who spends countless hours in the gym, diets, could have a physique like Mike Smith, like no donuts here. You know, they don't understand how guys could actually, through consistency, persistence, hard work, dedication, they don't understand how you could look like that, because they look like crap. So the fact that they look like crap, you should look like crap. You know, why am I not in shape? I don't know. Maybe because you eat like a fat slob every night and you don't work out and you avoid walking up the stairs at all costs. Like maybe the fact that you've never lifted a weight in your life has something to do with that. I don't know. Maybe the fact you were never athletic your entire life had something to do with that. You don't like to sweat. I don't know. You know, whatever it is, but there is jealousy that comes into play in these random dole tests. We see it a lot with guys with a muscular build. They're randomly doled, and you're like, it's impossible that you're randomly doled 18 times, and a guy who has the same identical last name to you was never doled. And by the way, Smith, how common of a name is Smith in the New York City Police Department? How common of a name is that? There has to be a couple of other dudes with that name. Ask them how many times they've been doled. Guess what? I guess they would just kept getting skipped over, and it just went right back to Mike. Like what I told earlier is when I was in IB my first year, I got dole tested 7 times. 7 times. I'm like, could you literally tell me at this point this is random? The 8th time, I was furious. I was like, let me just get this straight. The people that are in charge of doing these random dole tests, picking these numbers out, because IAB differs from the rest of the job. Vice OCCB used to have their own different dole testing as well. And what they would do is have whoever works for the chief just pick out who's going for the dole. So I'm like, that seems like a pretty flawed system to me, that I'm going to go my 8th time. Every time I got back from vacation, there was another girl in my office, and we used to joke. She would come back from vacation. I'm like, watch, you're going to get doled. She's like, oh, did it come down yet? I said, no, but it's gonna. And every time, like clockwork, me and her went on vacation. Well, once we got back from vacation, boom, we got doled. And so on my 8th time, I flipped out. Went to the chief's office. He's like, oh, hold on. Picks up the phone. He's like, yeah, we'll reschedule you. You don't have to go. I was like, oh, so if I was using drugs, I just played you and now it's good. And he's like, he just looks at me, and I just walk out of the office, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, people in this bureau are probably using drugs and will never get doled.
Yeah.
Never get doled. Guess what happens? The girl that was picking out the random doles retires. Somebody else comes in. I guess maybe they do it randomly. And guess what? Somebody pops positive for cocaine, right? That was never doled the whole time I was there. Well, I went 8 times and nobody else went any. And here I am like a weirdo. I look like I have tiger stripes on my leg because I'm not going to shave my whole leg. And you're walking around like a complete weirdo. Like your neighbors are looking at you like, dude, what's up with it? Why does this guy have shaving lines into his legs? My legs literally looked like I was shaving tiger stripes into them. And every time you go, it's hair and urine, because there's 2 types of doles. There's sometimes you're going to show up, and sometimes they're going to say just pee in a cup. Or sometimes they're going to say, we're going to shave you and you're going to pee in a cup. But yet, all of these randoms that I ever went to, and I'm sure the same is going to be true for Mike Smith, they told you pee in a cup and then we're going to shave your leg. I'm positive. And even that, the odds on that, it's impossible.
Well, yeah, you should have been nervous because 10%, between 5 and 10% of the testing tends to be false positives, and even so, like there are certain drugs that even pop up as like either amphetamines or THC. Like if you take Xanax or even have a poppy seed bagel, which I actually thought was a myth, but turns out it's actually true. You could pop with a false positive by eating a poppy seed bagel or anything with like hemp seed or even vitamin B, But it's testing for the peasants, and those people. The closer you are to the top, it's again the rules don't matter to you, yeah. But it's
like how many times do you think Kaz Daughtry was dole tested in his career?
Yeah, right.
Jeffrey Madry.
Right.
How many times?
How many times do you think, even if it was random, in which case we don't know because they don't publish the algorithm to explain how exactly you get picked up. So even if he was picked out randomly, how many times do you think it was squashed by Madry? And Madry gave a phone call like, nah, not today. I need him. I need him to drive me to my side piece today.
I'm gonna say that maybe early on once, maybe, but if you got past that early on, never. 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 Think, and these people are hanging out in drug dens. They're hanging out in places that's known for sex trafficking. They're hanging out in places that's known for drug dealing.
Yeah.
And they're not getting dole tested. They're hanging out with known drug users. I mean, you're hanging out with all these celebrities hobnobbing like your Frank Sinatra or Dean Martin, the second coming of. Hanging out with rappers who are smoking marijuana, using a lot of other stuff that they shouldn't be using. Shouldn't they be ones getting tested? You're coming back from a Diddy party. You don't think those people should have been tested? No.
Yeah, hanging out in a place known for having a drug buffet, Well, Jimmy Rodriguez places in the past, But yeah, it's this whole it, disjointed process that's part of course for the NYPD, and it's you can take this process. This disjointedness applies to everything. It applies to the overtime, it applies to drug testing, it applies to disciplinary process, it applies to just about everything on this job, and it's why the deeper we get into these issues, the more I think, how exactly do we clean this up? Where's the bottom that we start at? Because it's so systematic that it's like, okay, we got to fix the drug testing issue. Okay, we got to fix the overtime issue. We got to fix the disciplinary process. We get like where do you start? Where do you start? It's like, but I'm curious what's going to happen now that again this went to trial in Boston, and it's already been Boston no longer uses that firm. So I think that's coming here, and I'm curious where this is all headed to, because they will, whether they wanted to or not, they will now have to get a new framework.
I mean, so the thing is, though, like we see, like when the system fails and the system gets caught at being inept or clumsy or even nefarious, the system tries to cover up for itself, including the courts, right? I mean, just based on the fact alone that and at the minute the first cop sued and won and said that the Dole test was inaccurate, every person that ever failed the Dole test should have been brought back right there. And the system should have been changed. I mean, I don't know how we could say it was accurate, but yeah, it was inaccurate for him, but it wasn't inaccurate for them. I don't know how we're making those determinations. And so the fact that they're unwilling to change it, the fact that they're unwilling to turn over discovery or the algorithm used, tells me everything I need to know. It's the same thing when we look at the litigation for COVID. You won't turn over the statistics, because if you turn over the statistics, guess what? It's going to prove exactly what I said, what Marlon says, what the rest of us have been saying, that it's actually discriminatory. So this is Eric Sanders. Eric Sanders writes this. This is his case. And basically he's filing under Title VII Civil Rights Act 1964. He's saying facially neutral drug testing methods implemented without oversight, scientific validation, or legal compliance, resulting in discriminatory outcomes, career-altering punishments, and retaliation against officers who raise concerns. The complaint names both the NYPD and psych medics as respondents, citing their independent roles as administering, interpreting, and enforcing drug tests results without safeguards, procedural fairness, or adherence to federal regulatory standards. What we see here is not mere oversight. It's institutional insensitivity. The NYPD has allowed flawed silence and opaque process to dictate discipline without regard for fairness, accuracy, or humanity. Officers of color are disproportionately harmed, yes, but this regime endangers all officers regardless of race. It's a system cloaked in false legitimacy of randomness, while political insiders are protected and outsiders are punished. That's not justice. It's structural betrayal. I couldn't agree more. And the argument why he's saying that Black officers or officers of color are disproportionately targeted, you could add Italians in there too, by the way, big guy. And the reason that is because of the thickness and coarseness of their hair, right? So people with darker, coarser hair keep trace evidence. So like if you did come into contact in a club, you walked by a cloud of smoke, marijuana smoke in your hair, you would keep that longer than someone with a lighter hair, right? And that there was multiple studies done on that. And that's what he's citing as part of the racial bias in it. But he clearly says it here. The system's not just flawed for officers of color. It's flawed for us all.
Yeah. It's so what a lot of what Eric Sanders is touching on right now goes back to the Boston case, and in that case, experts did testify. Like I said, it went to federal district court, and the testimony states that basically, again, it's related to the length of follicle, the follicle length, and the color of the hair, and it just so happens that the minorities who tend to have hair color and follicle length that falls within what the testimony of the experts said, it's disproportionately affected by the drug testing method, which is what led to Boston reinstating those cops and effectively dropping that method of testing. But again, back in the late 90s, when this method when the job was looking to expand this method of testing, there were people out there who brought it up. Now, I know we have our issues with the ACLU, but they were one of those that actually brought this up, that it was a ineffective and the entire process was disjointed. So what I'm saying is basically that issue has always been there under the seams of this, and it seems to have just been brushed away up until this case in Boston, which is the underpinnings of Eric Sanders' case right now.
Yeah, and then so Eric goes on to write a random drug test that was anything but. According to the charge, Officer Palagucci, a decorated officer with no history of misconduct, was notified on February 22nd, 2024, that he had been selected for a random drug test. However, the selection was not announced via the NYPD's finest message system, which is a standard method for notifying members of the service about random drug screenings. Instead, the notice came via undocumented phone call. Palagucci, who had recently raised concerns about the discriminatory treatment and testing practices within the department, immediately questioned the legitimacy of the selection. So for those of you that aren't members of the NYPD, the finest message is basically a message that comes out every day. It tells you about transfers, tells you anything you need to know in the department, tells you who's been selected for random dole testing. Officer Palagucci is never on that list, yet he gets a call. Says, oh, you've been selected. Oh, that's weird. How come I didn't get selected with everybody else? And then he goes, and then voila, he fails. That in itself needs to be answered right on the face. How was he selected for this? Did somebody handpick him? There is a procedure in place. If somebody accuses you of, let's just say I showed up to work and I was talking like Kaz Daughtry one day, and everybody's like, whoa, what's up with this? What's up with this? This guy's just talking about drones. Like, what's going on here? I think John's high. So there is a procedure in place for that. That's called testing for cause, right? You're testing for cause. I think John's high. Never talks like Kaz Daughtry. Now all of a sudden he is. He must have ate like 4 or 5 of those gummies. He appears to be high. And so there's a procedure in place for that. And that is not just a random selection. You're notified. There's a lot of procedures. There's a lot of people that need to be notified. You will know that you're being tested for cause. So if that was the case for Palagucci, then those procedures should have been followed, but they weren't, right? Because they never are, because testing for cause isn't something that's done often. It's not. So I think right off the bat, when we look at the selection process, again, that's something that should be administered regardless of where you work in the NYPD or what agency you work for and you carry a gun. it should be equal. I think the selection process should be transparent and it should be equal. Like I said, how the hell was I randomly selected 8 times in a year? How was Mike 18 times in his career? How were all of you just randomly, and you know people that never were? How is that possible? It's not. It's impossible. Or the random thing they're using is highly flawed and nobody ever looked at it. And that's why they're not showing to you how these random selections are happening. So I think right on the face of it alone, you could see Eric Sanders' title, a random drug test that was anything but that. And that's why we titled this episode Not So Random Drug Testing, because it's obviously not. Just on the face of that alone.
Well, yeah. So let's go back to the for-cause testing, right? Now, the company itself, in their financial statements, actually points out that it's not suitable for determination of drug presence in for-cause testing. So they themselves say, in and of itself, it's not recommended for for-cause testing, and that's probably because.
Wait. Go back. Say that again and say that slow, because I need to understand this.
Yeah.
Say this again.
The company themselves, in their financial statement, right, for 2023, says they bring up for-cause testing, and it says, thus, it says it's not suitable for determining drug presence in for-cause testing.
So then, how is it suitable for random?
So basically, here's the thing. Basically, what they're saying is you need other things for for-cause testing. It can in and of itself be used in for-cause testing because you need 7 days for it to show up in the hair follicles.
Gotcha.
So they're saying themselves that if you're going to use it for for-cause testing, that you're going to need something else. So in and of itself, it's not good for for-cause testing. So and I'll bring up something else here, right? The fact that the hair length is such the length of hair plays such a big role in the samples that you're going to derive from the follicle, right? That in itself makes the process uneven, because again, if your hair is curly and if your hair is basically the straighter your hair is, the better it is for the sampling process. So if you have curly hair, then it's basically uneven, you know. So, and they said this themselves in their financial statements, by the way. So, I mean, when the company themselves is saying that the process is kind of uneven, then you know the entire thing is kind of it's not altogether fair, you know. But I think the big issue here, John, is that this company controls the process for testing all throughout the process. They basically control the stack, and during the testing, they destroy the sample, the initial sample that they tested. And this is a point that Eric later on brings up, and he calls it gatekeeping by the company. And that kind of, I have to wonder if one of the reasons why the entire process is opaque on the jobs end is because of it. You know, the more transparency you get, the more we go into this company's proprietary testing method, and that would all be revealed. And here's something else. Right? You know, that method, it has been in question, right? We've already established that. This company themselves basically says that, okay, where our method is better than your analysis, but it's proprietary. So it's basically like, you know, our method is better than that method, but trust us, bro, you know, because you're never going to find out like what they do that's so different per se than the other method of hair testing. So it's very problematic in terms of transparency of the entire process?
I mean, I love trust me, bro science. That's my favorite science there is. Trust me, bro. That's my favorite thing for everything. You know, now. Trust me, bro. We're gonna take care of this. Trust me, bro. Crime's actually down, bro.
That's been very popular these last couple of years, you know.
Trust me, trust me, bro. Don't worry about that old lady that got shot in the head and her nephew. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about the person that got shot randomly 2 hours before that. And don't worry about the person that got shot randomly last night overnight. Crime's down, bro. Trust me.
Don't worry about this experimental medical procedure that you got to stick in your body right now.
Yeah, no, and we just pulled it off the shelves because, you know, trust me, bro. We just needed to do it. It worked at the time, but now, you know. So Eric says the way they can get around it for all departments should be drug test, because technically they would still be driving under the influence of drugs. I mean, absolutely. I'm going to sit there and say, like, you can't say that one's greater than the other. It's like, you know, we're in this forbidden guns in New York City. It's like you wouldn't know New York City's part of America with the stance they have on guns. Like watching Eric Adams tweet, "It's a great day," as he destroys thousands of guns and thousands of dollars. And I'm like, what actually, that's actually so dumb. Why not refurbish them, rebrand them, sell them at bulk, make money for the city? Why are we spending money to destroy guns? You know, it made no sense to me. I'm like, this is ridiculous. But yeah, the take that guns are so bad and you need to be held to a higher standard. Like, no, I put the same amount of responsibility on teachers. I think that they have lives in their hands. They have very precious lives in their hands. They have innocent lives in their hands. They have people that are much smaller than them, weaker than them, under their control. I think, you know, firefighters, you know, Chief Lukesh says here, you know, firefighters always traditionally, even if they popped, they would go to rehab, even if they pop positive, even before marijuana was legal. Like, why is not the same true for cops, you know? And believe me, I'm not condoning marijuana use on this because again, like I said, I'm a big proponent of make marijuana organic again, make it a plant again that comes from the ground, and then maybe we could have the discussion. But for what's happening and being sold in these stores, I think it's trash. I think it should absolutely be illegal, you know. And unless there's some type of medicinal purposes you need it for, then yeah, the government shouldn't be able to dictate what it is. But it's to me like what you're seeing on the shelves today is the same thing with Robert F. Kennedy and the Maha movement, where they just got rid of these dyes, these red dyes, these yellow dyes, these blue dyes, because they're cancer causing. I think when you see the tests that come out and these non-organic THC things, I think in years down the road, the trust me, bro stuff is gonna fail on its face. So Eric Adams goes on. Excuse me, Eric Sanders goes on this. He says, upon the arrival of the NYPD medical division, Palagucci was subject to a not standard urine analysis, but a radioimmunossy of hair, RAAH, a method of drug testing that analyzes strands of hair to detect metabolites over a 90-day windows. While marketed as more comprehensive than a urine screening, RAIH has never been approved by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration for use in federal workplace testing due to its inability to distinguish between environmental contamination and ingestion. Its destructive testing method and well-documented racial disparities in drug retention among darker-haired individuals. Palagucci's sample was analyzed by Psychmedics Corporation, the city's longtime vendor. The results, according to the charge, were inconsistent with the science based on cutoff levels and later contradicted multiple independent drug screenings, a polygraph, and a court-admissible toxicology exam. Nonetheless, the NYPD used the test to suspend Palagucci without pay, demote him, and began disciplinary proceedings. So, and that's the other thing, right? Like, so the job takes, I think they take 3 samples, right? They shave you once or is it twice? I forget. I haven't been shaved like cattle in a few years.
Yeah.
I think it's 2. I think they only take 2 samples. They take 2 samples. They shave your leg once. They shave your leg once. They take all this hair and then they package it up in 2 different packages. Right. One package goes out to this lab. The other package stays in the control of the NYPD. So if you pop positive, I forget exactly how it works, but they'll let you send it out again one other time to be tested, but their sample. I was always like, and I was always afraid of that process as well, because I'm like, that whole process could be easily manipulated. If you want me to pop positive on a dole, it's very easy for you to do. It's very, very easy for you to do.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, the Psychomedics, which is the company that does the testing, is the only, they themselves say this, they're the only manufacturer, right? They're the only manufacturer that also has their own screening process to, obtain obtain the biological, to analyze the biological sample, right? And the fact that after this is done, they destroy that same biological sample, and that process is proprietary, is like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it's like red flags pop up in my head. You it's not like there's an other independent company that's actually doing that's doing the procedure to analyze the sample and then going back to that company. But the fact that it's all one company is kind of like, so this company basically exists on their whole shtick is that, listen, our process is 5, and they say this themselves, our process is 5 to 10 times better than your analysis, and it's much better than comparative hair sampling techniques. But the problem is, though, that the more positives they bring back would be, the better off their firm is, because now they'll go to other departments or other companies and say, look how effective we were. We found all these positives, right? So that's a problem to me, because you control the entire testing stack. So now you're kind of incentivized. It's kind of like a feedback loop of incentivizing you to like be like untransparent in that process. And to me, that's it kind of sets up a couple red flags, and this is exactly what Eric Sanders is talking about here. So
yeah, Kenneth Flores says, John, they're full of it and you know it. I honestly don't, man. I've been talking about this for a long time, even when I was on the job, that this is not random, this is not fair. People that are actually using drugs are allowed to, and they're never getting tested. And people that don't use drugs are at risk of popping positive on a false positive. Because again, like I told you, I know numerous people, not the girl with the weave, Pat, by the way. I know numerous people that have popped positive and are still on the job because they won, because the courts under the courts have upheld that it was a false positive. I'm like, so the fact, and we still use the same system. It's absolutely insane. So no, I don't question anybody. I mean, unless I was there that day taking the sample, and I knew, and even then I would still question. I had spoken to a medical division person one time, because I became so friendly with them in the year that I was there 8 times, and so that and they said, we were talking about someone who popped positive. I won't say exactly who it was, but somebody had popped positive, a high profile person. And they said, I always know when someone's going to pop positive because they're super nervous when they're in here. And I'm like, well, what about the randoms? There's like, there's a couple of one-offs. There's definitely one-offs where it gets me. They're like, but some people, I know they're going to pop positive, and they pop positive. They're like, sometimes people pop positive and we've seen it be false. And we were talking about that. They said, but other than that, I've seen people come in here and I'm like, oh, this person's going to pop positive. They're over talkative. They're over joking. They're over happy. Now, is that science-based? No, it's not. It's just their feeling on it. You know what I mean? It's like the guy that doesn't have high blood pressure, but every time he goes to the doctor, he does, because he's afraid. I mean, that could be possible too. It could be that they have white coat syndrome. They're just afraid and they're over talkative. But what the medical division had stated is like that's usually the sign that someone's going to be positive, is like they're nervous when they're there. They're over talking. They feel like they did something wrong. They're trying to figure out whatever is going on. But right here, Need says Detective Terrell was randomly drug tested 6 times in 2 months until he had to sue the department on the random basis. I never read that. I read a lot about Detective Terrell. I know he was being demonized in the papers for doing police work. He was basically the Eric Dim before Eric Dim. And then he haven't seen about him in the papers too much, but I'll check that out. But 6 times in 2 months, I mean, if that tells you right there, just more about how these tests are not random. So the EEOC filing identifies a broader pattern of misconduct, according to Eric Sanders. Officers of color are subjected to hair testing at higher rates than white officers. I would debate that if you were talking about internal affairs, but in overall in the job, possibly. Unequal disciplinary outcomes for similarly situated employees. Some white officers with positive results reinstated quietly, while officers of color are demoted or terminated. All over the place, unequal disciplinary outcomes, 100%. I mean, we've seen that over and over again. Like I said, some people keep their jobs. Some people are demoted and keep their jobs. Some people are terminated. Like, how? I thought if you pop positive, you were terminated. What's the difference? And so again, you see the arbitrary and capriciousness of the department. Refusal by the NYPD to disclose comparative data or trial decisions, thereby obstructing efforts to challenge discriminatory enforcement. So again, right, we're consistently told if discipline is not equal, it's discriminatory, right? So, we can't. You did this. John did this, and Marlon did the same exact thing. But John, we promoted to detective 6 months later, and he was able to go on with his career. And Marlon, we terminated, right? But so what does the NYPD do? Instead of showing those outcomes, those trial decisions, what do? They hide the data illegally, by the way, because it's illegal to hide discovery, but they do it, and they do it under the guise of saying that, well, it happens so often. We get so many of these things. We get so many of these FOIA requests that we're unable to fulfill them, which is completely a lie and completely inaccurate. So what's been happening is, for any case, doesn't matter if it's discrimination, it doesn't matter what it is. What these attorneys have been in the habit of doing is suing for the job to disclose this information. The job never discloses the information. They say it's too time consuming. And then the lawyer sues for lawyer fees and all of this other stuff. And the city just pays them out over and over and over again, while all of the actual data is hidden. That would 100% prove everything that's what's being alleged here. So they do that. And then the process continues. So, and the last charge is use of the drug testing program as a mechanism of retaliation against officers who question internal practices, raise discrimination complaints, or advocate for reform. I'm also going to add onto there, or are in shape and the fat, out of shape men at the top are jealous of, or they just don't like you. And retaliation also against dissenters. Palagucci's case, the charges assert, is not an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of practice of using drug testing as a proxy for racial targeting, political suppression, and retaliation against dissenters. I would add in there jealousy.
So, do you think, John, that all of testing along with internal affairs should be conducted by an outside agency? Well, I'm thinking like the state police or somebody does that, because we how many times have we heard stories of retaliation? Guys who bring up issues, and then weeks later they're dulled.
All the time.
Yeah. So and at the same time, we're hearing about all these cases that are tied back to the 1PP, and when you look further into it, those cases could have revealed everything that was happening from the get-go. and those cases were squashed. Like we hear about Seidman and Vidot, those two detectives that were in the DOI, and they had a case going, and the case pretty much intersected with every issue that we've talked about on the show, and a lot of the issues that Sal himself has brought up, and a lot of it going back to Consafrito. But how many times have we heard of those cases being squashed, and then like the investigators being doled, or those who brought up complaints against the department being sent to dole? And when you look at those two issues and how they tend to intersect, I tend to think maybe like internal affairs and the whole mechanism for testing should be brought under the purview of like maybe the state police, because unless we do like a top down like fix of the job, reform of the job, I can't see how those processes are going to remain fair and like balanced if like we still have that structure at the top that's like corrupt. I would think that these mechanisms have to be brought by an outside agency.
Well, I'll tell you, it shouldn't fall under the purview of a mayor who said that he'd rather be wearing white all day, growing a beard, and smoking weed all day than running for mayor. I think that those practices should, whoever's going to be in charge of it should not fall under his purview. Considering most of his friends smoke weed, and he himself says that he was able to roll 8 joints out of a nickel bag. So I would think that it should not fall under his purview. I would think that someone that celebrates the use of marijuana shouldn't fall under his purview. Someone who has proven to not have integrity should not fall under his purview. Yeah, I absolutely think that it should fall under an outside entity. I received a bunch of messages last night after we put out what we were going to talk about. This one's from a friend. Won't mention his name, but he said, I got doled after every promotion. I've been randomly doled about 25 times. I got jammed up 2 years. I was on probation. I was dole tested 7 times in the 2 years while on probation randomly. He goes, when I approached 20 years, I got doled. When I approached 25 years, I got doled. When I approached 30 years, I got doled. And I heard an insane story last night, and I hope the person is brave enough to come on one day and spoke to the person directly, won't blow them up, won't go into too much detail, but basically became a target of an IAB investigation. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. I'm done with this job. Investigation goes nowhere. He puts in his papers to leave, and guess what? Randomly doled. It's like, and it's constant. It's a constant thing. You see anybody that falls under any type of publicity, any type of something that is an adversarial stance to the department, doled.
Yeah. That's a problem. That's very much a problem. Like a lot of the issues we're having now, I wish the job would just put out its algorithm out there and let us know exactly how random this is. You can stop a lot of these discussions, right? Well, at least half of it, because there's still issues with the company itself. But you can stop a lot of these issues right now if you just publish the algorithm. Let us know how members are selected for dole tests. Okay. Now, granted, for cause testing will always be there, because if somebody says, okay, I saw Marlon smoking a joint at the club or something, then okay. But this random testing, there needs to be there needs to be transparency in that, and that transparency could come easily if the job simply published the algorithm and let us know how, there's a system. Let us know there's a program running and it's randomly spitting out tax numbers from the job. Let us know that you can do, and that doesn't affect the process at all. And it would, again, stop a lot of these discussions. and let us reassure us that there is some measure of equity in the process. That, one more thing, the job loves to talk about equity, doesn't it? Especially lately. And yet you still have processes like this that are like untransparent. So which one is it? Are we about fairness and equity now, or are we not? You can't get up on your pedestal and constantly preach about equity and all this progressive talk while still holding processes that are like clearly unbalanced and unfair.
Yeah. It's honestly, the thing is, like, if it wasn't flawed and the job didn't know it was flawed, why would they protect certain people from it? And why would they make more people be subject to it? Why would they make others be subject to it? If they didn't know there was a flaw in the system, why is it weaponized against people they don't like? It's not weaponized to people they suspect of drug use. It's weaponized
Good point.
Against people that they don't like.
Yeah.
So I had hit a door and I had gotten like a significant amount of cocaine. And now I was careful. Like I still till today, like if I'm out, I do this with my eyes. I had gloves on, I was always worried about exposure when dealing with drugs. But I was vouchering a large amount of cocaine. Right. And just happened to be, I was up for about 2 days going through this process of the search warrant, the vouchering, all this stuff, right? By the time we hit the door, got all the stuff, processed the bodies. Now I'm doing the vouchering. The contacts that I were wearing were kind of new, and they didn't allow a lot of air to breathe to my eye. I didn't know that at the time, right? They were kind of new. I had no idea. I'm wearing them for 2 days. I hadn't slept. And so I'm vouchering the cocaine. And so for vouchering, for those of you that aren't cops, it means I'm putting it into evidence. I'm bagging it up. I'm typing up what I have. I'm weighing it. But I was very careful, and I was very careful not to touch my eye. And I had always done the same thing. So I'm like, and I was pretty well versed in vouchering narcotics at this point. So like I wasn't worried that I ever slipped up. But my SOL walks in while I'm doing it, and he goes, "Bro, you just touched your eye." And I was like, "No, I didn't." I was like, "I didn't. I absolutely did not." I said, "I've been doing this. Like, if I had to." I said, "I don't even think I did it." He's like, "Bro, go look in the mirror." I go look in the mirror. My eye is swollen and red. And I'm like, holy shit, right? So now I'm like, I start to feel it. But I finished the process. I finished the whole process. And now my eye's light sensitive. And I can't even keep it open, right? I can't even keep my eye open. And I'm like, fuck, man, I don't know what to do. So now I'm like, now I start panicking. I'm like, did I touch my eye? So everybody's like, so they're like, yo, your eye's fucking bad. Oh, excuse me. They're like, your eye's bad. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what to do. I was like, shit, man. I was like, did I touch my eye? And now all I keep hearing him saying is you touched your eye. But I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I didn't touch my eye. But I'm like, what the hell's going on with my eye? I can't see anymore. And I'm like, crap. So he's like, listen, he's like, you're going to have to do an exposure report. You're going to have to go to the hospital and get it checked out. So I'm like, okay, no problem. So I go to the hospital. I guess they do this exposure report ahead of time instead of waiting for me to go to the hospital, which they probably, so if this happens to you, go to the hospital first and then do the exposure report, right? Don't do the exposure report first. I think they did the exposure report first, and then I went to the hospital. Anyway, I go to the hospital before I go draw up. So now this is 3 days at work without sleep, and I have to go draw up on a 3-day search warrant again. But I go to the hospital and I tell them what happened. Anyway, they take my contact out and they're like, nah, you're good. There's nothing in your eye. You didn't touch your eye. Your eye's not exposed. You were not exposed to this at all. They were like, there's no exposure. Everything looks good. They're like, your contact ripped your cornea because you weren't getting enough air to your eye. Those contacts are no good for you. Get different contacts. So I'm like, okay. So, but I had a huge tear in my cornea. So now I was wearing sunglasses like for the next week at work. Right. I didn't go sick for that. Right. I had one cornea. No, but whatever. Anyway, so whatever, I draw up. But after that happens, 90 days elapse, I instantly get drug tested. 90 days elapse after that, I instantly get drug tested. And I'm like, this isn't random. Like they're doing this because they submitted that exposure report prior to me going to the hospital. Like, and it was stupid. Like, I was like, this is stupid. Like, you should have just doled me for cause. Should have just said, like, we think you're full of crap.
Yeah. You know what it sounds like? It in a lot of ways it sounds like the person who's picking the names, like they're looking for reasons to pick names, like exposure report. Okay, we got him now. But it's like the process, like we said, it's unfair. It's unfair, and we need to get some measure of equity in it. But if I can, like, in a lot of ways, like when I think about like I've seen narco guys that are just like packaging, they're invoicing their crack or whatever just with their hands, without gloves. And like you look back on it now, I'm like, in a lot of ways, I think the job is a lot smarter now about it, because like I look back and like when we were in like the FIO's office, sometimes you can't even find gloves. There are no gloves in the precinct. And when you think about like your exposure to a lot of these drugs, and you think about the fentanyl crisis that's there now, and how potent fentanyl is, how easy it is to be exposed to that.
Scary.
And you think about like the days when guys were just invoicing with their hands and not even wearing gloves, and it's just, man, like I can't believe this job, how backwards things were sometimes. Like I like when we got to the office, the FIO's office, I would always, like, since I was on patrol, every time I go to a hospital, I'm grabbing a box of gloves, because I know the precinct there isn't going to be any when it's time for me to go invoice drugs. But it's like, it's just absurd that like some of the things that we did, and knowing like we could have been exposed to all of this stuff. And just think of it, you might have been exposed and not even knowing that you were exposed. And it's just, man, I'm glad that in a lot of ways the job is so smarter about it now, but it's just crazy.
That's horrible, dude. I'm guilty of when I was tossing people not wearing gloves because I couldn't feel properly. I'm totally guilty of it. I should have wore hospital gloves, and I like, even though the job never had them, every time I was in the hospital, I grabbed, or if I was with EMS guys, I was like, yo, let me get a box. So we always had them in the car. I should have been smarter about that. Like when the rest scenes, like I use my hands a lot, now I wouldn't, like with this fentanyl, like this is crazy, it's crazy. But even back then, like the way you could have been exposed and positive on a dole very easily from it. You're in these cars, they smell like marijuana, there's cocaine all over the floor, they cut something up and threw it on the floor. Here you are, you're scooping it up. It's like very easy. It gets in your nail, you have a little cut by your finger, it gets in there, like very easy for you to pop positive. GI Bro brings up a great point, and me and Erica did an episode about this as well. He says you need to talk about the interim order that came out last year about supplements, which was so vague, broad, and ambiguous. So now if you try to stay in shape, screw you. So yeah, we care about your health, GI Bro. We want you to sleep right. We want you to eat right. But if you take any supplements and you pop positive, the job's just going to deem that you do steroids because the test is faulty. So they actually kind of admitted it even last year in that supplement thing, that the test is absolutely faulty, and taking supplements could cause a false positive. About 10 years prior to that, they had put out another order, and they said that any supplements you take need to be NSF certified, like National Sport Federation certified. And that's the standard used for college or Olympic athletes. And so I traditionally do take the creatine I use is NSF certified. Magnesium is not really a supplement. It is, but it's not. I don't know that even falls under an NSF category as like a workout supplement more than like a health supplement. But it's absolutely ridiculous to say you can't take supplements. And I'll tell you, taking supplements is great. Creatine, I mean, brought back my strength to like really, I feel great. I feel young again. I feel like empowered. But magnesium, like I said, I've told all you guys, like as I get older, like I don't know what the hell's going on with me, but like my anxiety's like I never even had anxiety, but now I do. But magnesium has kind of like leveled that out for me. And I kind of just feel normal again. And so I think as you get older in life, or as you take injuries or something, it's very important to start to look at holistic approaches instead of taking heavy drugs. Like, oh, you get anxiety, here's these psychedelic meds. It's like, what? Oh, you got high blood pressure? No, don't diet, don't work out, take this with high blood pressure medicine. So it's very important to start to utilize supplements. But the NYPD basically admitted that if you take any type of supplements, you could get a false positive, and the job could say you're using steroids when you're not, and they're just going to fire you when there's going to be no recourse, which is absolutely ridiculous. Because on that same note, I know people that have popped positive on Dole tests for steroids and are still on the job today.
Yeah. If I could just dig a little deeper into what Eric Sanders says about the disproportionate amount of Black and Latino.
Sure.
Like what I'm curious about also is if there's a disproportionate amount of guys who work out and guys who are like athletes, or like you said, guys who are say guys like Mike Smith, guys who work out like that. I'm very curious what's the percentage of them that get Dole tested. And I hope in this process that Eric Sanders is able to get a hold of those numbers too, because that'll really give us some insight into like where things are and the problems, and it'll blatantly show you that there's the like the retaliation and the jealousy and those other issues that pop up. But like we're saying, you guys out there who are especially the narco guys and the guys who are doing search warrants, the FIOs, you guys, you don't have to wear a Tyvek suit to a search warrant, but if there's something you should learn about, you should gather from this discussion, is that you have to be very careful, and you should protect yourself, and that includes, having the appropriate protection for, whatever narcotics you happen to be in contact with. And in fact, the case in Boston now, the testimony, the experts that were brought on to testify, they basically came to the conclusion that that psych medics, the follicle testing procedure can't distinguish drug particles from an external sources from drug particles that were ingested. So what that effectively means is that if you're heavily exposed to it, you're going to pop on it. So again, you got to be smart about it, and you don't be like us, like the dumb things that we did. You got to think, especially as this process is going to go to trial now, and I'm pretty sure they're going to have to get rid of it. But in the interim, you still have to face it, and you have to be smart about it. So
Pat Donahue says, which union is assisting Palagucci? He was in the DEA when doled, but then was demoted after the failure to the PBA. It's a great question. I don't think anybody's assisting him. The fact that he has Eric Sanders representing him shows that his unions are basically like, I don't know, kid. I don't know. That's crazy, though. So you come on the job and you're told you're going to be exposed to all these harmful incidents. you're going to be exposed to, you're going to be exposed to drugs. You're going to be exposed to narcotics. You're going to be exposed to things that can harm you and kill you. And the test that the NYPD is using to determine if an officer uses drugs can't differentiate between an exposure or an ingestion. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? And then every night, like you saying that, I just flash back into all the cars that I've been inside of that reeked of marijuana, and I'm sitting in them for a half hour, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, while I'm vouchering every piece of paper in that car or anything that I could find in that car. Sometimes an hour and a half going through the trunk, going through everything, stinking. It's in your nose. It's everywhere. It's all over your clothes. And Job like basically sitting there telling you, yeah, but by the way, you can't really tell if you were just exposed to it or if it was your hair was just exposed to it. So the fact that I have coarser hair, during those times I would have been dole tested, I would have had a problem. That's what that's telling me. If my arm would have brushed up on something in that car, in the seat, if they had dumped powder on the seat and smeared it in and I had brushed up against it, I'd have a big problem. That's scary to me, man. That's just basically telling me you're expendable. And that is the exact reason why they protect their friends and their children from having to fall under the scrutiny, and why they use this to target other officers. Oh, you work? You go out there? So we're not concerned really about drug use. We're not. We're actually hoping that people pop positive falsely. That's why we send the in-shape guys there. That's why we do all that. That's amazing to me, bro. That is, so Eric Sanders also, he labels out psych medics the silent gatekeeper. While the NYPD carries out disciplinary action, the charge squarely names psych medics as a co-respondent. The Texas-based lab, a major player in the hair testing industry, is the city's exclusive vendor for hair testing. It conducts initial screening, confirmatory tests, and issues the final report, often forms the basis of career-ending decisions. Critically, psych medics operates behind closed doors. The cutoff threshold it uses are proprietary. The sample is consumed during testing, eliminating any opportunity for independent verification, and officers have no right to challenge the lab's methods or demand a third-party review. This lack of transparency, the charge argues, creates a due process vacuum, one that disproportionately affects officers of color and whistleblowers and all those other people that we need. Under Title VII and UGESP, employers cannot delegate their responsibility to ensure that testing methods are valid, non-discriminatory, and scientifically sound, nor can they rely on third-party vendors whose practices have not been independently audited or validated for fairness and compliance. Yet, according to the charge, the city of New York has done precisely that, outsourcing life-altering decisions to a private contractor whose procedures remain shielded from scrutiny. What do you think about that, Marlon?
Yeah, it's that feedback loop, It's that feedback loop that incentivizes them to think about it. The more positives they get, the more they get to say, hey, look how effective our product is, right? And good luck, fighting that, because again, they own the stack. They own like all the steps in the process. And again, by their own financial statement, they said Psychmedics is the only hair testing laboratory that manufactures our own screening assays. Assays is a term meaning testing process, or how they analyze the sample, right? They said we have full control over all aspects of our technology, right? Basically, again, they control the entire process. So again, and that entire process is behind a wall of proprietary techniques and technology. So it's a feedback loop where they're incentivized to come back to the companies they work for, to go back to their clients and say, look, we got you We got you so and so amount of positives. Look how effective we are. You know, and it's a problem. It's a major problem. There should be, this company should have an outside company, an outside vendor that handles some aspect of the process to keep it fair, because that outside company wouldn't be in that feedback loop where the company would be incentivized to keep coming back with positives, and that is a major problem. And again, like we said, there's no transparency here, and there's no transparency on the job. So how is there equity in the entire process?
Yeah. And so what Sanders ends with this letter is, with this media release, is he says, too often civil rights violations and law enforcement go unchallenged because of the blue wall silence. But Officer Palagucci is standing up not just for himself, but for every officer who's been targeted, retaliated against, or silenced. Honestly, he's standing up against the whole entire test. So anyone that's ever really been tested under a test that's been deemed to be not accurate, over and proven in court over and over again. This case is just about science and the pursuit of fairness and the law on his side. The EEOC will now investigate claims and may issue a determination if the agency finds reasonable cause to believe discrimination occurs. It may initiate conciliation or issue a right to sue letter permitting civil litigation in federal court. In the meantime, this case puts the NYPD and its private testing partner on notice. Institutional discrimination and scientifically unsound policies will no longer go unchallenged. So again, I'm like, I don't know what else we need to do to prove that this system is highly flawed and is weaponized.
Yeah. This speaks, there's a larger issue. Like I've talked about the issues in Western society before, and there's a larger issue here where we have processes and companies that exist, but when you dig deep into them, you realize, like, should that company really be there, because their product is not really effective, and their product really doesn't do what they tell you to do. It's like, I'll give you an example, right? Like, something I've noticed that last couple of years is like companies pushing a solution to a problem that doesn't exist, but they're effectively creating a market for themselves. And I bring this up in the case of like virtual reality technology. Every company under the sun, every tech company under the sun for the last couple of years has been trying to push a technology that, like, we don't need, and they're effectively trying to create a market that doesn't exist there. So I'm bringing this up in relation to this testing method, because since the very beginning of this company, the founder comes, the founder since the very beginning has been trying to kind of create a market for himself, and you go back and you look at the history of this company, it hasn't altogether been kosher, So when I look at this now, I think to myself, like, should this process really be there? Like, the product this company is offering, how effective is it really? And if it's not really effective, like they claim to be, like, why are we still using it? Why does the police department have a habit, and government in general has a habit of dragging on processes that are ineffective? If it's ineffective, let's get rid of it and move on to something that is effective, instead of dragging this on. Like I said, since the late 90s, this has been questioned, and since 2022, when Boston dropped it, this should have been questioned on our end, and we should have been either trying to find an alternative or either increasing transparency in the process so that there's less questioning. But that hasn't happened. We've still dragged it on. We're dragging on the inefficiency for years when it shouldn't be.
Because it's always been done that way, Mo. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, and that's always the mindset. That's how we do it. It's like, yeah, but does it make sense? Does it work? Like, what? Like, are you trying to find people who are using drugs, or you're not? Like, what are you doing? Yeah. Like, why are we testing a failed test and it doesn't even tell us the accurate information? an exposure. So we're potentially terminating good cops, and not and your system is protecting people who actually use the drug. So what are you doing? Like that's the thing, like that really needs to be highlighted.
Yeah.
The Dole test protects people who uses drugs the way that it's randomly selected. There are people that are never going to flow in that algorithm. There are people that are never going to get selected. And if they do, they're going to get out of it. That's a big problem. That's the biggest problem I see here, is that people that are politically connected or are up there in the ranks can use drugs. So you're not trying to eliminate drug use from the NYPD. And people that you're sending for these supposed random tests, when most of them aren't random at all, and anyone with a brain could see it, they're potentially going to pop positive for an exposure and not an ingestion. So you're losing cops that are going out there partaking in the core mission of policing. While they're doing that, they're being exposed to drugs, and because of that exposure, they could pop positive as a result of your random drug. And on top of that, you use this test to discriminate against officers. You use this test as like a punitive measure towards people you don't like, which makes absolutely no sense, and deviates from what the test is there for, to determine if your employees are using drugs. But you're like, hey, you know what? He might pop positive falsely, so let's just keep testing him. Let's just keep sending him to the Super Bowl. And one day he's going to lose. That's what it is. It's disgusting. It's honestly should never happen, could never happen, but honestly should never happen to you either, Marlon. Like what's happening with you should have never happened, should not happen in a society. But here we are. We have cops that will defend this system. That's only going to harm them later on. And you have cops that are going to defend your termination. And guess what? It's only going to harm them later on as well. So keep defending the alligator until it comes and eats you.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, John, because that's exactly an example of we keep doing things that it didn't work, but yet we're like, let's continue. So those of you who watched the show on Wednesday, we had a certain politician on, from a certain place in Queens with some great food, right? And I know a lot of you have been wondering, like, what's going to happen to me and all that. But you shouldn't worry too much, because I have a plan for that, which, after this podcast is done, I'm going to hop on my bike and I'm going to do some deliveries in that certain place in Queens for DoorDash, I'll do it for $2 an hour. So, that certain politician will care about me, and maybe I'll take a flight to Mexico and just come over across in Texas, and he'll care for me. He'll care about due process and rights again. But it's like John asked him the question, like why the vax failed, right? And yet there's still people defending it. It's like this process. It's been proven now. It's gone to court, and there's been objections from the beginning. It doesn't work. It doesn't work as expected, and yet here we are continuing it on. What? Why? Let's get past the failures and get something that actually works as intended. And it's a big problem in our society now. People just go along with the program. And also, just to bring it up, I'm also hearing from a lot of cops about the conversation we had with Trammell from the MTA last week. A lot of cops are still upset with him, and those same cops are defending the job's response. And to me, I just don't understand, because like John said in that conversation, right? Like John said on Monday, right? I mean, ultimately, Trammell and the MTA, they don't understand the procedures of the NYPD, right? So what cops should be more upset at is the response of the NYPD, but yet cops are defending it, it's what John. It goes back to what John is saying. It's like you keep defending these things that are wrong, you know, hoping that it's not going to get to you. You know, eventually it's going to come and eat you too. You know, we need to get past these problems. We need to if it doesn't work, let's stop dragging it on and pretending like it does.
Like it just shows like how inept at supervision the NYPD is. I don't blame cops for being upset with Tramell Thompson. You should be upset with Tramell Thompson. The post was unnecessary. Like I don't blame you for being upset with him. But the fact that you're not allowed in MTA break rooms has to come from your supervisors. That comes from the NYPD Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch and the Chief of Transit. They're ultimately the people that harmed you as a result of a social media post that he had posted probably 5 times over the course of the last 2 years. One time it went viral and they see this and they're like, oh, let's just make them all stand out there like peasants for 16 hours. And you not being more upset about that is insane to me. You know, like as a supervisor, like it was often I would get called to a scene, someone complaining about the cop. Whether I like the cop or not, what's the first thing you're told to do this in the patrol guide, but it's the right thing to do. Besides the fact that it's procedure, what's the first thing you're supposed to do? Talk to your cops. What happened? What's going on? Right? Why? So you can understand the situation. You kind of have the presence of mind of where the cop was and what's going on. And then you speak to the complainant. What happened? Well, he told you this. Well, they told you what happened with that, you know? And that didn't happen yet. Nobody ever got your side of the story. Like, oh, well, I was on a break. It was 20 minutes. No, it just came down. It's literally the equivalent of a lady coming, like complaining about one of you for whatever reason. And I show up to the scene as a sergeant and I bypass you. I don't even talk to you. I take her CCRB and I walk away. That's what happened to you. That's what the police commissioner did to you. That's what the chief of transit did to you. That's what it is. Instead of your sergeant giving a crap about you and seeing what situation you were in and getting your side of the story and documenting, at the end of the day, I might have had to take the CCRB because she was whatever. She was incensed that she wanted to file a complaint. I mean, it never really happened to me. I always had a way with people, but if at the end of the day I had to go through with it because she was like, no, I want to file this complaint. If we couldn't squash it. And that wasn't my job, by the way. If you did something wrong, I wouldn't have covered up for you. That's just not me. Like I said, I grew up not really liking cops. I don't like people abusing anybody. But I was never those situations. It was always kind of a misunderstanding and I was able to squash it. But imagine there's a situation that I was able to squash, and this was definitely one of those situations that was not only able to squash, didn't even need to be addressed. How about that? Didn't even need to be addressed because the supervision's out there. You're getting scratched multiple times a day while on post. It didn't even need to be addressed, right? But instead of me even doing that, I walk over, I go over to the complainant, I take the CCRB, and I walk away. I get back in my car, I drop a CCRB on you. That's what they did to you, and you're not upset about that? I'm upset. I'm upset that they did that to you. I see a lack of supervision. I see a complete lack of supervision there. I see a complete lack of people who actually respect what you do because they never did it. Right? What does Jessica Tisch know about standing down in transit for 16 hours? What does she know about that? No place to go to the bathroom. No place to take a rest. What does she know about? How does that feel? Does she even know what it feels like on your legs? Does she knows what it feels like to not sleep and do it again 3 days, 4 days in a row, then go to a detail, then get your tour changed and go somewhere else? Do these people even know? No. Do you think Haz Daughtry knows like that? No, he doesn't know. He knows how to put his nice, fresh white gloves on, get behind the wheel, and go kiss a politician's ass. That's what he knows. So these are the people that are making those decisions. If you guys aren't upset about that, shame on you. Then you deserve everything you get.
Yeah. So let's bring it back to the beginning. In the beginning, John brought up the question of why is this drug testing applied so unfairly to the NYPD, whereas it's we don't apply the same standards to the other agencies in the department. We came to the conclusion that part of it is because as a cop you're held to a higher standard. But I'm going to say that when I see cops clearly gloss over the jobs response in the MTA issue, and when I see cops gloss over that and completely ignore the jobs response, I think to myself, that's why the process is applied unfairly to the NYPD, while they forget about testing for the other agencies, because they know no matter what they do to you, you're going to continue doing your job, and you're going to continue being effective at doing your job. No matter what they put on you, NYPD is going to continue doing. Again, though, it's going to be the 10% that's going to be doing that work, right? But they know that you're gonna gloss over everything that they do to you, and you're gonna just continue doing it, continue working. You're going to ignore the fact that processes like this drug testing process is unfair and untransparent, and you're gonna continue working. You're gonna ignore the fact that 2 to 3 years ago now, 3 years ago now, they told you either get this experimental procedure or you're fired. And you got it, and you continue going, and you don't even talk about it now. You don't bring it up to your unions. You just continue doing your work, and you just continue being a good soldier. And that's why they continue applying unfair processes to you. And that's why until we stop having Stockholm syndrome, they're just going to continue doing it. So I think it's a shame, and I hope, at least now that the conversation is going, that at least in terms of this process, there might be an outcome, a positive outcome.
And just one more note before we get off this and we move on to the next topic. I want to get on Leticia James, and I want to get on another incident that happened in New York City. But before we move on to those topics, there's a court case that I've been following. A cop who was terminated from the NYPD for his religious beliefs because he would not comply with the mandate. The people that are testifying in his court case, Tanya Meisenholder, former deputy commissioner of equity inclusion, a police officer, young rookie police officer. He didn't have a year on the job. He had zero experience. He signed off that he was the investigating officer on this police officer's religious exemption. He signed off that he was the investigating officer, but then testified to that he never investigated anything, and someone made a predetermined decision and he just signed in it. So he basically perjured himself. That's police officer Charles Mamerly, I believe his name is. And then I think the other person was a director, Mike Milkowski, who's since been promoted. So what the city's now saying in this case, they've uploaded documents. I showed you guys an article that they were using to base why they were denying religious exemptions. They used an article from a former pastor who wrote an article in the Times, basically saying an opinion piece, basically saying that there's no religious reasoning for refusing a vaccine ever. There can be no valid religious reasoning. So, I mean, that statement is so highly flawed from a former pastor. And even if he was an active pastor, us as humans, our thought processes are often flawed by our own biases. There are probably a million reasons why religiously you can say, I don't want to put something in my body. I wouldn't even try to attempt to spell them all out here as why there's so many reasons. And I could do probably a 4-hour podcast, and at the top of my head, just give you reason after reason after reason. I'm not going to do that and subject anybody to that, but such a highly flawed reasoning on their ability to deny these religious exemptions. So they use this basically article as the basis. I posted about that on my social media. We had spoke about it on this podcast. And since then, the city has decided to upload to double down on it and actually upload into the case details that exact article and show that that was the basis of reasoning. Absolute insanity to me that this is going on, that this case wasn't just settled right there, right then and there. The city didn't just say, okay, we're wrong. So what the city's now trying to do in that case is, you know what they're saying? They're saying, well, the city actually didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't actually us. It was Tanya Meisenholder acting on her own. It was Charles Marmley acting on his own. It was Mike Milkowski acting on his own. And so my point in telling you guys all this is, like I said originally when I started talking about these people, I see no reason to lie for the system, because you're trying to cover up for a system, for a policy that you didn't implement. You're trying to fit a round hole into a square peg and say that, no, this policy was great. Why? You didn't create it. You just followed what you were told. Why lie for this system? And yet they all done it. They've all, in my opinion, they've all perjured themselves on the stand. I've posted it. I've showed you guys it on here. They've all perjured themselves on the stand, putting themselves in criminal liability as well as civil liability. And the city is saying, oh, we didn't tell them to do that. We didn't tell them to do that. No. We're just representing them now out of convenience because we have to represent ourselves. But those things that they're pointing out in this case, yeah, we had nothing to do with that. And you don't think that's going to happen when it comes down to the dole testing? You don't think that's going to happen when it comes down to anything, any policy that you're told from this department? You know, the key word I always want you guys to listen to is when you hear the police commissioner or you hear any of these out of shape, low integrity, politically appointed managers in the NYPD standing up there and saying discretion. We give our officers discretion. Our officers have discretion. And the reason they're doing that is they're distancing themselves from you. They're saying everything you do is on your own. It's not at the direction of us. I want to retire and I want to be left alone. It's you. Discretion. So that's what they're telling you, Tanya, and that's what they're telling you, Charles, and that's what they're telling you, Mike. They're telling you you had discretion. That was the discretion you utilized. Now, and again, that argument from the city is false because they are agents of the city and they were acting under the policy. Them lying as a result of it, them doing all the other things, yeah, there is some civil liability on their end as well as criminal. But at the end of the day, it was the city that pressured them into doing it. It was the city policy that was ultimately flawed and discriminatory. So just think about what you're doing when you go forward with the city.
That flawed policy is just carried on and defended. And you know what gets me to is that in the case of Boston, right? Boston settled for, I think, 2.1 million. But all their legal costs when they dragged it all on was double that because they dragged it on, right? So I have no doubt that in a lot of these cases, the city's going to drag it on, and it's going to, when it all is said and done, they're going to end up, it's going to end up costing the taxpayers double or triple had, as opposed to if they had corrected it in the first place. But it's terrible.
Yeah, and it's the same thing now. And they're saying, we can't hire Marlon back. You know how much money that is? It's like, he should have never been fired. The only reason it's this much money is because Eric Adams decided that Aaron Judge and Kyrie Irving were more important than a New York City police officer. And this would have never cost the city $1, right? Our salaries were already funded. I mean, granted, they were given away to people for on-duty booty and cash for ass program. That funding was completely misused, illegally misused, and stolen from taxpayers. But that's not our problem. What? We're dangerous? No, we're not. everything you told us then it failed, So whatever. But let's move on. Let's move on. So for those of you that have been following the Sal Greco show, you've been following the Finest Unfiltered. You've seen you've followed New York's Finest New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered podcast. You've seen Sam Mantar appear multiple times. We've told you about Sam Mantar over and over again as whitecollarfraud.com. So he had recently did an expose on Leticia James. He's been doing these civilian audits of all of these politicians. He didn't just pick Leticia James out of a hat. I mean, if you go back on Sam Mantar's tweets, you could see him go through city council, the New York speaker, the speaker of New York City Council. He goes down to the list. He goes through their campaign financing. He finds all these discrepancies, all of these things that should have been reported but weren't. So he's been doing this a while. So when he did this for Leticia James, and by the way, Sam's a Democrat. Sam is not a Republican. He's not a MAGA guy. He doesn't even like Donald Trump. I think if you go back to the episode that we did with him, me and Eric, he says it that he's not a Trump guy. Like I don't particularly like Donald Trump, but I like some of the stuff he says. So what he does is he finds that all of these statutes and all of these properties that Leticia James owns, that she's listing them as her primary residence, a property in Virginia, her property in Brooklyn. She's listing as a 4-family when in fact it's a 5-family. All of these different discrepancies. Anyway, it goes national, right? Trump picks it up. He retweets it. Everybody starts going nuts with it. The right media, the Benny Johnsons of the world, they all start pushing it. Leticia James. Now, Leticia James has done a couple of media tours where she won't address the specific allegations, but she just says the claims are baseless. But the paperwork's there. I mean, I'm looking at it. I'm like, I don't know, man. This doesn't seem too baseless. So she hires an attorney. Supposedly, he was Hunter Biden's attorney, and he was a couple other politicians' attorneys. Some of those people were actually wind up firing this guy, but she hires him. So I'm not going to say whether he's a good attorney or he's a bad attorney. It has nothing to do. But he writes a 33-page letter containing documentation trying to debunk the claims that Sam Mantar made that were eventually referred to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution. And what they're saying basically is that this criminal prosecution is political retribution. This is Donald Trump now going after Leticia James. And on its face, I have to laugh at it because this is the same to me as the Eric Adams case. If you watch Sal Greco's show yesterday, I think you should watch. I think you should go back and watch it. He has Serena Townsend on, and Serena Townsend goes through the curious case of Eric Adams, and she compares it to Luigi Mangione. So Eric Adams said that he needed the case dropped so that it didn't interfere, so that the trial didn't interfere with his ability to do his job. But clearly, anyone that's charged with criminality, that charge and that court case is going to interfere with your job. So that's kind of a stupid claim. And then he claims that, well, the prosecutor played this case out in the media and found me guilty before my trial. The same exact thing that he did to Luigi Mangione. So now here, Leticia James, who we all know politically targeted Donald Trump, who stated over and over again how she was going to go after Trump as the attorney general, who ran on that basis and then campaigned and continued to campaign in a political manner to go after Trump, not only him, but his corporation as well. So now her attorney is saying that this case should be thrown out because it's Trump's Trump's Department of Justice has been politicized and weaponized. What are your thoughts, Marlon?
I think Serena. I first heard this from Serena, and I've heard Jason Goodman of Crowdsource the Truth, who Sal had on this week, by the way. and it was another great show. But I've heard them kind of coin the phrase that it's basically a lawfare trap that Trump has inadvertently stumbled into, because you see now Leticia James is basically saying that this is all political, and we're going to keep seeing this defense being used by all these politicians that are getting caught up in all their corruption is finally being surfaced right now, and they're all going to claim it. And I'm like, I keep seeing it, and I'm like, I just got to shake my head, because it's just as they said this was happening. Now, Serena was the first person I heard say it, but Jason kind of coined the term lawfare trap, and you see it happening more and more. And I think that you got to wonder if this has all been a trap to like pull in Trump, and how much it's going to affect him by the midterms, because this, there are more and more politicians we're seeing getting roped up into this mortgage fraud. Jason himself brought up he brought up Congressman Jamie Raskin and Adam Schiff, and he suspects himself that there are other Democrats in Congress that are doing this. So you got to wonder, when the spotlight gets on them by the DOJ, are they all going to use the same defense too?
Cuomo's using the same defense as well. You know that, right? For he's saying the same thing. Like, you're going after me politically now. You're saying that I lied in front of Congress in the COVID Select Committee, which he did. And he should have been held accountable under the Biden administration, but the Biden administration's was politicized and weaponized, his Department of Justice. Trump's Department of Justice appears to be politicized and weaponized as well. So it's like, wait. So are we just going to hold politicians to they could break the law and it's fine because it's political? Maybe I'll get elected. I'll be the kingpin, because that's what, that's now what Cuomo's claiming too. He's claiming the same exact thing. It's crazy to me, dude. It's like they opened up. Serena nailed it, bro, when she said that. It was a lawfare trap, and that's exactly what it is. I personally think that the siding with Eric Adams immediately and showing how politicized and weaponized the Department of Justice system is right away was the worst move Donald Trump made to date. Like that, and I honestly think it's going to come back and bite him in his ass. I honestly do. I think that was a terrible, terrible precedent to set. And so you dropped the charges that were against the person that was indicted. You don't even let him go to court, stating that he needs to be able to work with you and he needs to be able to campaign. At the same time, you're bringing up charges now against his opponent. He doesn't need to campaign. So it's like the whole thing, it's a mishmash. But that's not to say that all these people are not guilty. You know what I mean? They're all like the problem here is that, like, Trump literally was targeted politically. He was, but now everyone's using the Trump defense. I mean, what we saw happen to Donald Trump and the Trump organization was a politicized attack against him. Why he tried to bring Eric Adams under that blanket, I have no idea. I don't care that now you have, I put out a meme yesterday, Eric Adams serving, he was like serving Donald Trump lemonade, because Eric Adams quote, "All my haters become my waiters." And I put a tweet with Eric Adams with that meme. And the tweet was basically, he said that Donald Trump's a white supremacist. Right. So, and what I said is, Donald Trump's hater winded up becoming his waiter, because that's what happened. But to weaponize, to basically go away from the rule of law, to walk Eric Adams, the poster boy for the Democrats for the last 3 years, around on the yard holding your pocket, I don't think was worth it. I don't, because now as you're trying to right wrongs in this nation, these things are going to come back. And this is going to play big into the Leticia James as well. So what Sam puts out yesterday, he responds to the attorney's letter. The attorney brings a couple of points about why Sam's wrong and the information's wrong, and why the Department of Justice better not go through with what Pulte's saying. and the Trump administration. Again, they're trying to make this as these allegations coming from the Trump administration. They're not. They're coming from a civilian auditor who wasn't just ever just looking at Leticia James or Democrats. He does this to everybody. This is what he does. So he plays with numbers. This is who he is. This is what he does. So he says, breaking, Leticia James's lawyer made stunning error in federal defense letter. In a high-stakes response to a federal criminal referral, Attorney General Leticia James' defense lawyer submitted a letter to U.S. Attorney General that reveals he fundamentally misunderstands the property at the center of the investigation. If you want to read the full analysis, go over to whitecollarfraud.com. It'll take you about 8 minutes to read. So this is what Sam says. The lawyer claimed James' property, her Brooklyn property, has always functioned as a 4-person residence. But official New York City records tell a completely different story. Certificate of occupancy classifies it as a 5-family dwelling. Con Edison shows there's 6 separate electrical meters. The lawyer describes a 4th floor that doesn't exist. Tenants' complaints directly contradict the lawyer's claims. HPD records show complaints from Unit 1, which lawyer claims was occupied by James's mother and later James herself. Complaints from Unit 2B prove someone other than James lived in the space the lawyer claims was exclusively hers. These complaints are dated April 16, 2025, making it impossible for James to have occupied the 1st and 2nd floor units herself as claimed. These aren't just embarrassing errors. They have serious legal implications related to mortgage eligibility, HAM program violations, and New York City building code compliance. How does an attorney general representing New York's chief law enforcement officer get such basic facts wrong about the property at the center of the federal investigation? Hashtag legal accountability, hashtag public integrity, hashtag New York politics. He CCs the attorney general and the attorney general of the United States, Pam Bondi.
You know, I see a major reluctance on the part of like the Trump administration to like really go after these people, you know, and I can't, you know, I can't figure out what it is, you know. So I mean, for those of you watching, I mean, don't get it twisted because we voted for Trump. I voted for Trump 3 times, and I'd vote for him again, right? Because I think he was the better candidate. But that doesn't mean that we can't criticize him and hold him accountable for what's going on. And that doesn't mean that we have to like what's going on either. And I certainly don't like what's happening and why there's a reluctancy on his part to go after these people, especially since these people were foaming at the mouth, basically, to throw him in Rikers. Yeah. So, like, I just can't understand the ongoing pattern that we're seeing here, where Trump kind of backs off these people, and then they, especially in the case of Eric Adams, and then he throws it back in their face, you know? Like, I'll give you an example, right? So Adams has now joined the congestion pricing lawsuit, right? I mean, what are we doing here? You know, even in the face of the you know, Trump administration giving Hochul a deadline for that. Oh, and by the way, a deadline which she you know, she threw back in their face and said, basically, I'm going to continue doing it, right? And they gave her another deadline now. And now Adams is joining the lawsuit. And not only that, but he's trying to claw back the $8 billion in migrant funds. So this is even after basically Trump gave him a break, you know? So like we're seeing all this corruption come to light in the case of Leticia James. And I'm watching. I'm getting my popcorn ready because I want to see if there's enough pressure for them to finally like you know, open the tap and go after her, you know, because this pattern is becoming obvious to a lot of us Trump voters, and we don't like it, and I certainly don't like it. There's more than enough there. There's more than enough between what Samantha noted in Brooklyn and her property in Virginia for there to be some investigation going on by the DOJ.
No, I agree, man. I mean, you know, I think on his first term when he won in 2016, when he said, "Oh, if I get elected, you're going to jail," and then
Yeah.
he completely backed off and said, "Oh, it was great service to Hillary Clinton. To you did a great job. You're a national treasure." Blah blah blah. Blah. I'm like, what the hell is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
What
Remember the
hell is
locker up chance? Yeah.
that? You know. So I'm with you, bro. I hate the politics. Again I said, the famous line that went around on Donald Trump was no one's above the law. Well, Eric Adams appears to be above the law, and Leticia James appears to be above the law. And honestly, the entire political class of New York appears to be above the law. Unless you're not liked. Because I remember what they did to Grimm. They went after him for like 7,000. They threw him in jail, got him removed from Congress. I remember that, and prayers to Mike Grimm. I think he's seriously injured from a horse. I think he was left paralyzed. So, but I remember what they did to him, and I was like, wow, that's so weird. None of these people go to jail, and yet this guy's going to jail and was removed from Congress for like 7,000 in unpaid taxes. It was something insane, And I'm like, that just shows like if you're not liked in the political class, you're good. It's like being in the NYPD. If you're liked, you're not subject to drug testing. If you're not liked, you're going to get drug tested. And hey, you might even pop positive, even though you didn't use drugs. And we're not gonna look into that. Don't worry about it. We're not gonna follow that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Veronica says, Electron says, are you saying that Trump is a BS artist? I'm not saying that. I think he's pretty straightforward in how he feels. I just think that Trump's first administration, he surrounded himself with bad people. I don't think they were great appointments. And I think again in now in 2024, I think a lot of his appointments, I'm like, what the hell is that? And I think some of the people that are around him are BS artists. Absolutely. I mean, watching Kash Patel, or if you ever watched on any of the podcasts Kash Patel did, or if you ever watched any of the podcasts that Dan Bongino ever did, and you watch them talk about the deep state, how they would gut the entire FBI, how they would throw these people out. Some people they even named, and now they're in the office. And not only the people that they said they would throw out have been promoted under them, they're just playing the same games that the FBI was doing prior to them coming in. Yeah, some people are BS artists, and those two appear to be to me. I mean, I'm not. I'm not liking what I see out of Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, and I'll say the same for Attorney General Pam Bondi when it came to the Eric Adams case. And you want people to sign off and say they did something wrong for doing their job. And you watch now, I think we're up to 7 people have resigned over Eric Adams, which appears to be politicized. So am I going to love anything that anyone ever does? No, never. I mean, it could be Marlon up there. I'm going to be like, I don't know, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? It could be me. I'll question the things that I'm doing. But you have to understand, when we're talking about the office of the president, a lot of the stuff that happens under your administration, you don't have a million eyes and you don't have a million hands. I mean, you're appointing roughly 16,000 people to take care of major functions in your office. I mean, some of those appointments aren't going to be great. I mean, I don't care who you are, unless you have a real strong circle of 16,000 competent people who aren't going to do dumb things. Let me know, because then you would be the ultimate manager, but you're never going to happen. Even someone that you trust, that that you think is competent, they'll fail at some point, or they'll do something stupid, or they'll do something you wouldn't expect them to do. So no, I'm not saying Trump's a BS artist at all. I don't think he is. I think he talks genuinely from who he is.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, Veronica, we're advocating for his agenda. I've said it before that he needs to clear up the corruption in order to get all these. He's getting all these foreign companies and all these countries to invest in America. Now, that means there's going to be a lot of money flowing into America, right? If you have this wide corruption going on, do you think that agenda is going to be accomplished? Is all that building that he wants to do going to be accomplished, or are these parasites going to be siphoning out their own crumbs, and whereas where our infrastructure continues collapsing, because I don't want to live like in China, but you got to give it to them. Like you get, at a certain point, they're going to, when you get caught being corrupt in China, you get thrown to the wolves, literally. I'm not saying America needs to be that way, but I'm saying you got to compete with that. And we've reached at a certain point in our history where like a lot of our infrastructure is falling apart, and we need like new energy infrastructure. We need new factories. We need all these things. We need to improve cities that have like deteriorating sewage systems, like New York. And yet we have parasites in the government that are just festering and eating off the system and not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So those two things can't coexist. You can't make America great again, and while America remains corrupt. You can't. There's gonna have to be a measure of house cleaning going on, and you can't ignore these problems like what Leticia James is doing. And as Jason Goodman says, as he's talked about, this is probably systematic. There's a lot of it going on. You're going to have to do a measure of spring cleaning in order to get to an America that can compete again with China. So we're if anything, we're advocating for Trump to accomplish his agenda. We're just saying that he's falling into a trap that's going to hurt him in the long term, and it's going to derail that agenda in the long term.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. Listen, there was a bunch of crime we wanted to get into. There were multiple innocent bystanders shot in the past couple of days, even though we're saying that we have the lowest amount of shootings in recorded history and 5 straight quarters of crime being down. A couple of you guys sent me clips from Sid Rosenberg's show this morning where he had his 3 favorite cops on. He was so honored. They gave him a sergeant shield. Vinny Valalon gave Sid Rosenberg a sergeant shield for his work in getting the contract done. And they were talking about how crime's down, what a great job they're doing, but there's more work to be done and whatever. The fact is, crime's through the roof. Neil S. brings up breaking news. A man stabbed by a stranger in New York City subway station, the Brooklyn Bridge City Hall station, platform number 5. The man was stabbed in the chest. It's taken to Bellevue. He's in critical condition. The whole crime and down narrative is an absolute joke. The crimes is this one of the 4.8 felonies a day in transit? I guess it has to be because the news reported it. But if it wasn't reported by the news, I don't think it would have been one of those 4.8 felonies a day in transit. We're not going to get to those topics today because we're already about 2 hours and 12 minutes in. But I just want to finish up on one last topic. But I just want to say crime is not down. Maybe the amount of reports they took for shooting was the lowest in history, but that does not mean that the bullets did not fly in the same amount as they normally do. They're basically relying on bad aim to make history because bullets have been flying. So, and that's not a lie. That's a damn fact. And it's a good thing that they shut down the radio so the news can't hear exactly how many times shots have been fired in New York City during that period. So this comes out yesterday. Just more hypocrisy from New York City and the NYPD. Right? NYPD cop sexted with an undercover girl posing as a 14-year-old girl, an NYPD cop sexted with an undercover officer posing as a 14-year-old girl while overseeing the youth outreach program. An NYPD officer was tasked with community youth outreach, is facing charges in 2 boroughs for allegedly sexting an undercover cop as posing as a 14-year-old girl, according to prosecutors. Travis D'Souza, 35, appeared in Queens Court on Thursday, 6 months after appearing in Brooklyn Court on child endangerment charges for sending sexually explicit messages to an undercover officer he believed to be just 14 years old, authorities said. Last October, cops sent out to ensnare D'Souza in a sting operation after suspecting him of unethical behavior in his capacity as supervisors of the Police Explorers program, an NYPD youth outreach initiative for teens and young adults between 14 and 20 who want to pursue a career in law enforcement, according to a complaint. An adult undercover officer approached D'Souza while posing as a youth participant in the Police Explorers program, telling the alleged perv that she was 14 years old and asking him for his phone number. Of course, stop trying to bag me already, the creepy cop replied to her request to the document. According to the document, he continued the lurid overtures and innuendo via text and social media while explicitly acknowledging that she was a minor, officials claim. And I don't even know why you got me thinking things I shouldn't because of how far we are of age, LOL. I should be telling you to stop, but your maturity and the way you act is different, D'Souza allegedly messaged the undercover agent via Snapchat. Eventually, D'Souza tried to seal the deal with the faux teen girl by sending her a picture of himself with an erection while wearing boxer shorts, the complaint alleged. What's under those shorts? The undercover agent wrote over Snapchat, according to the complaint. Something big, maybe more than you can handle, D'Souza allegedly wrote back. The accused perv was working within the confines of the 7-5 precinct in Brooklyn while allegedly sending some of the shocking texts and sent others from an NYPD building in Queens, which is why he's facing charges in both boroughs. Officer D'Souza has been suspended without pay from the NYPD, the department said on Thursday. So that's the second time now he has been suspended without pay. And obviously, everyone is guilty until proven innocent, right? But the reason I wanted to bring up this case is I just wanted to highlight the hypocrisy in this. Because, again, this person's been on payroll for over a year, health benefits. He's suspended without pay his second time. That is 30 days. After that 30 days, he will be suspended with pay while the trial ensues. And if he's found guilty, he will be either terminated, or if he's not, he may keep his job depending on what goes on with that court case, right? These are all allegations at this point. What is that? What does that say about Marlon Bethel? 7 days, impeccable record, zero disciplinary history, did nothing wrong, violated no crimes, was accused of violating no crimes, was accused of an administrative failure, nor was ever alleged to have done an administrative failure, yet within 7 days was terminated from the police department. The other hypocrisy I see in this is the undercover officer's messages, right? And the fact that because where he was sending the text from, he's getting multiple charges, right? When we had told you about a year ago of an NYPD sergeant who threatened the lives of my children and Eric's children by making threats directed towards us on his social media, that he was going to come to our houses, that he we have beautiful families, he's coming right for our houses, pictures of AR-15s. And yet the NYPD, Internal Affairs Bureau, has not taken a report, even though I instructed them that as that per their complaint reporting guide, they're entitled to, considering the fact this was an active NYPD officer who was sending these threats while at work. So the reason I even brought up this case is just to highlight those hypocrisies, right? The inconsistency in investigations, the inconsistency in standards, the inconsistency in practices. I mean, it just can't. What do you think about this, Marlon? This kid's accused of, if true, horrific, horrible acts violating the trust of those he's supposed to protect, the most innocent, the most vulnerable, a 14-year-old girl, yet he still remains on the job. What do you think about this?
Well, I think there's a wider issue with that in the department that's just under the surface. And the reason why I think that is because, in the last 15 years, right, since the TikTok generation, right, the TikTok era of policing, the social media era, like that, the kind of like the walls of professionalism have been lowered in police departments. There's a lot of fraternization with especially with teenagers and kids. And whereas I think in the past there used to be like a more professional wall, now the whole, like, the job policing pushed cops to be, too far on this, on the other end, where it's like you're so friendly with the public that it's like that professional demeanor has been dropped. And I think what we're seeing here is one of the byproducts of that happening. First of all, we already know there's a problem with like that there's a problem with like masculinity in the West. And I think there's a problem with mentorship and guidance for young men. And I think that how that plays into here is that the walls of professionalism. So you have a lot of young men who didn't have proper mentorship and masculinity in their lives, and now you have the walls of professionalism gone, and so much fraternizing between cops and teenagers that you have like perps like this that manage to find their way in and use that as a means to try and pick up a teenager here. And I think I have to wonder if how systematic this problem is in the job. And I also have to wonder, like, what kind of standards do we have here? Like, you should be using your job phone only to communicate with these kids. There shouldn't be any sort of like we're friends on Facebook and all this stuff is like really weird to me, because there's a certain point where it's like, dude, it gets really weird when you're chatting with a 13-year-old on Facebook. Okay, that's a little weird now, that why are you on Facebook like that? Why aren't you using if they need to contact you, you should be using your job phone only. There shouldn't be any sharing of other additional loans. What do they have to talk to you that they need your private number or your contact outside of the job for, right? But when we see this department being so obsessed with partying and like this fraternization, it doesn't surprise me at all that we're seeing issues like this. When we see what's going on at the top in 1PP with Marjorie and his obsession with like, all this deviant behavior at the top, then are we surprised that sort of deviant behavior isn't trickling down to the bottom level? It's
gotta be. I mean, that's exactly what's happening. And the lines have definitely been blurred. I agree with you 100%, but I think the lines in society have been blurred, and then the lines in the department.
Yeah.
Like, I'll tell you right now, if the department ever asked me like to do anything with children, I would have somebody with me at all times. Yeah. More than likely a female officer. At all times. I would have no communication with them other than like over a job phone or a job email. That is it. Because it's just not, it's insane. It's insane to me that the job allows what I would never allow in my own household. Like, if a grown man texted my daughter, there's going to be a problem. I don't care if it was the most innocent text in the world. It's like, what are you talking to my 14-year-old daughter about? My 13-year-old daughter. What are you talking to her about? Why you need something, you come to me. You don't ever text my daughter. Don't ever let me, and like, when I think about that, I'm like sitting there and I'm going, this is, my daughter, my older daughter's 13, right? She's 13. She has friends come over. Yeah, I have no problem. My wife's home. If my wife's not home, like, nah, she can't come over. Like, if got to drive the girl home, yeah, no problem. Let's go. You're all coming with me. You know what I mean? Like, everybody's coming with me. Like, I would never, not because anything would ever happen, but just the respect of the youth, like the respect that you're a man, like, you should never be alone with a little girl that's not your daughter or your niece or anything like that. Like, that's like an intimate thing there. Like, why is the job allowing people to even be in this situation where this could happen? You know, like why there should be like if we're gonna have kids in our precincts, there should be serious rules put into place around what should happen. And apparently there aren't. It's a free flow and everybody's hooking up. Everybody's misusing their authority to try to get something to happen. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. But what do you think about, like, seriously, like, what do you think about the hypocrisy? He's still on the job, dude. This is his second arrest now. This is his second criminal court case. He's getting suspended again for 30 days without pay a second time. All this time, he's accruing money towards his pension. You were never offered the same type of due process. But Mondani, you know, no, he would not hire you back, but he'll protect the due process for the criminally accused.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I said on Twitter. It doesn't. You can apparently you can now do anything. You know, you can break your oath, break the law, as long as you're in compliance. You know, the medical experiment was so important, right? It's so important that it kind of it negates the core mission and the core values of the police department. You can forget about all of those things as long as you're vaxxed, and it's so you know, my argument about it all along is because it's about money and budget. And whenever I see this, I'm like, yeah, it's got to be because of that. But because it just doesn't make any sense, you know. But again, like I said, like what does a 35-year-old man have to talk to about with a 13-year-old kid? You know,
no.
That's like wait, what are we going to talk about? You know, the kid is watching cartoons and you're a grown man. You know. And the fact that the job is like it doesn't seem to me. Now I haven't been there for 3 years, and I haven't been in a precinct with exposure to the youth officers in like 10 years at least now. But it's like where are the standards that the job sets for behavior when you're working in that unit? Because there should be. A 35-year-old man should not even be, you know, I question them even having a prolonged conversation, even if with a job phone, a prolonged conversation when they're not in a precinct. Because like if there's anything that you need to have such an extended conversation with the kid, you're talking to their parent, you know. And the other problem with this is that a lot of these kids now come from broken homes, and it means because they're from broken homes and they have problems in their home, they're now more susceptible to that influence, you know, which is why the job has to put clear standards about behavior in that unit and clear guidelines to prevent things like this from happening. You know, I'm glad that they continue to sting on him, that they continue an investigation on him. But, you know, between his first incident in October of last year and now, where they clear guidelines for youth officers, have boundaries been established in that unit to prevent this? Because it doesn't seem like it has.
No, I don't. You know, and I always say that, like, I don't understand like where we're at this point. You know, always like doing details, whether in uniform or you're doing anti-crime. I mean, girls throw themselves at you. You know how many times girls rolled up at the red light, threw their number like at the car, or like threw it in the window. Call me, dude. I don't know their age. I don't know anything about them. Tourists coming up to you, slipping their number in your pocket. Like what the hell is going on here? You know, and all of that stuff. And most of that stuff, honestly, if you did it, it would be fine because most of traditionally around, they're probably around the same age as you. They're grown women. I was like, I'm not getting involved. I could, if you don't like me when I'm out on a bar myself, and you like me now because I'm in uniform or you see that authority presence, I don't want to partake in that. Like that's not, to me, it's like I don't even want to start off there. Plus, you're throwing yourself at me as a woman, like, I mean, not really a good look on your character either. Like, you know, and so, but like to think that this is so much a step further than that, because you're literally misusing your authority to take advantage of women. And now here, children too, for your own deviant needs. The moralities like in society, it's really, it's a sad state, man, you know, and that's why like I get infuriated And I talk a lot about, line of duty funerals, and I talk a lot about the upper echelon of the NYPD latching themselves onto widows, and because it infuriates me. I always said I don't care if the woman's highly attracted to the woman, and even if I had strong feelings that I liked her and I was single, I would never do it because it would be misusing my authority. She's in a vulnerable state. I'd be taking advantage of her in a vulnerable state, and that has happened, and that is equally as disgusting. Well, not equally as disgusting, because anything you're doing with kids is a whole new level. But like that line's been blurred. We see the people. It's the same thing as if a cop goes to a domestic abuser's house, and the wife's there battered and alone and afraid, and now all of a sudden you're looking to get your rocks off. You see someone in a vulnerable moment who sees you as a savior, as a protector, and they like you, and like you're going to take advantage of that. Like, what kind of man are you? And I used to say all the time, like, I used to tell guys, and sorry to the girls there, but I used to tell guys all the time, like, don't work directly with girls. And everybody's like, why? I was like, you can work with them once in a blue, but don't work with them a lot, because they become very attracted to you. They look at you as like the protector. They don't really like you, dude. Like they see you like it's a natural thing that happens, and you don't want to be put in that situation when now you work with this person and you're like, yo, what the hell? You know what I mean? And that could happen too. And that thing happened. And by the way, those are innocent things that happen. And if you guys are single, whatever, things happen. There's plenty of people that got married through the job but like I always avoided those situations, and to watch where the job is now, where they're like, oh yeah, 35-year-old man giving his own phone number to a 14-year-old girl. Yeah, no, that's good, because they're just talking about the Explorer program. Absolutely not. I'm just happy it wasn't my daughter. Like, that's all I'm saying, because I'm going to jail. Like, I'm showing up at that precinct. There's a problem. There's a big problem. Like, that should never, a grown man should never be texting with a child. Now you're a police officer. Why are you giving her your personal number? Why is there a conversation there? To me, I don't care. Like, if all of these allegations are false, and the conversation was innocent, I still want him fired. Don't you ever give your number to a child. If all of the allegations are false, but the one part's true, that they were texting on his personal phone, fire him.
Yeah, it's man-child syndrome. It's man-child syndrome. What you see, like, I bet if you look at those texts, the guy will be talking like if he's like a late teen. And that's a huge problem in Western society right now. You have grown men who act like they're like they're teenagers again, and you have this extended period, right, where like teenage years now extends into the 20s, and I'm kind of seeing that a lot. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the problem is because like getting your own place and moving out of your parents' house has become so hard. So a lot of like, in the case of young men, a lot of them stay in their parents' house, they stay in their parents' basement, and it's either because of like the parents or because of the fact that they have shelter over their head. It kind of stunts their growth and maturity, and that's how you get to like a 35-year-old being able to conversate with a 13-year-old and talking in their language, and going back to what you said, like that void in this case, because a lot of these teenagers, especially when it comes to parts of the city like the 7-5, they come from broken homes. They don't want to be home because their homes are a nightmare. Let me tell you, I once went, for those of you who aren't cops, right? I once went to, this was all like a culture shock for me, because I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood with houses. When I first came here, we lived in the 6-7, but like when I was 10, we moved out to the 6-3. I lived in a house. I had like a normal, a normal upbringing. So when I became a cop and I'm going to projects, it's kind of like a culture shock to me, because even though I rode my bike around one when it still had old people in it, I never really went inside. So I'm going inside the apartment, I'm seeing like a mound of dirt in a corner and roaches all over the place. And when you see that, you get why these kids don't want to be home, you know? And in that home, there was no father there. You know, it was just a bunch of kids running wild, and mom is she's either working or she's not attentive, you know? And you see a lot of these kids' homes are like that, so they don't want to be home. And in this case, someone like that, he kind of falls into that void that they're missing of a father figure, you know. And it's very dangerous that the job doesn't set guidelines, because if you don't set guidelines, more of this is going to keep happening, especially as the job itself lowers the standards to become cops, and as the job deteriorates and we can't find the best candidates who wouldn't do that, the candidates who had the best qualifications and the best demeanor and the best and morals, you know. So this is a problem, and like John said, it's people like this, like that guy, they fall into that void where these kids who are missing guidance and father figures in their life, they attach themselves to that.
Yeah, no, it's disgusting, dude. It's absolutely. And the other part, I'm like, oh wow, the job's actually functions. I didn't know they're actually competent. They could actually put together an investigation and charge properly. I didn't know that. It's sick, because you know, like the old saying in the New York City Police Department is refer the complaint, never refer the complainant. Meaning, I show up to a precinct and I want to file a report, or I call the precinct and I want to file a report, and it didn't happen in the confines of that particular precinct, or maybe even in that jurisdiction. The good old saying was always take the complaint and refer the complaint, not the complainant, not the person that's calling, right? Don't re-victimize the victim. So I had wrote this to Jessica Tish the other day. I said, question for NYPD Jessica Tish. This is all hypothetical, of course, even though it's not. But let's, hypothetically speaking, say a deranged NYPD news sergeant, while on duty in the confines of New York City, made social media posts directed towards Eric Dim Cop and myself, threatening the lives of our children. Who would be responsible to take that report and investigate it? I'll tell you, the New York City Police Department would be, and in the jurisdiction of the precincts in which those threats were made, which if they did a proper investigation, they would know. But considering they didn't, more than likely, they don't. The below evidence was turned over to the NYPD Internal Affairs over 1 year ago, and absolutely nothing has been done. 4 investigators, 2 Group 1 COs, 2 chiefs of internal affairs, and 3 police commissioners later. Please have those responsible to uphold the integrity of the department, if there is any left, refer to your complaint reporting guide. So this was threats that were made to myself and Eric. These were posted on a handle, All Cops Are Woke, who was determined to be an NYPD sergeant. I will not put out his name because the NYPD has never actually confirmed that this, in fact, is the person. But I'm telling you, it was an NYPD sergeant, and we haven't been wrong about any of this from the gate. Very nice kids you have. Hopefully they have a long life. I have 2 daughters who are about the same age. So he puts that out on his social media, completely directed at us, so much that I never even followed this guy. And dozens and dozens of people like, yo, they're threatening you and Eric. He is look what he's putting out. This is one post. Here's another one. Hopefully nothing happens to your family. Kids are precious. NYPD sergeant. Right? And who do you think would be responsible to take a report? Does this seem like a crime to you? Because it looks like a crime. It looks like a targeted threats over the internet while someone's on duty in New York City. Oh, I wonder who should be responsible for that. Do you? ACOR, All Cops Are Wokes, takes social media threats seriously. ACOR is after your home. So another thing that was sent to us, right? Here's a map of Florida. Right? Obviously, doesn't say like they're coming from New York, but we knew who the hell it was. Our time on Earth is limited. Let's make it count, right? And he has a little dot on the map, just right about where I live, right? So NYPD internal affairs, the previous investigators who were covering up all the corruption complaints that you later read about in the New York City paper when you found out that the upper echelon of the NYPD is systemically corrupt, running a racketeering extortion rings, they're sexual deviants, they're misusing overtime, they're misusing taxpayer funds. So that investigator had said, oh, we can't take a report for you. You have to go to your local sheriff's office in Florida. I was like, I wasn't even in Florida when I got those threats. Either was Eric. So what are you talking about? I was like, secondly, we know where the threats were made. And as per your complaint reporting guide, you're responsible to take the report. Who are you talking to? Are you talking to a civilian or are you talking to someone who has 18 years of experience, 2 years in the Internal Affairs Bureau, and 2 years who oversaw all of your investigations? So what are you talking? Who are you talking to about? Someone that had top tier access to every investigation that occurred in the Internal Affairs Bureau at that time. Who are you talking to? Are you talking to somebody else? So he played that game for 2 years, eventually got thrown out of internal affairs. Another guy took over that case. He also got thrown out of internal affairs, got brought back later and moved over, lieutenant. Then we got another lieutenant took over the case. He didn't know what to do. So he winds up pointing it off to this other sergeant. This other sergeant gets the case. You know what he tells us? Well, like, did you generate a report yet? We give him 3 months to review the case. You know what he tells us? Well, the previous investigator. I'm like, whoa, you're gonna tell us about the previous investigator? The previous investigator who was thrown out of his unit because they were covering up corruption at the NYPD. The previous investigator told you to go to your local sheriff's office. I'm like, oh, okay. So before we go any further, are you refusing to take a report for us? Guess what? Has not responded to that question. So we'll be filing more allegations against you and everyone that touched this case, because it's absolutely ridiculous that there are nothing that's coming out from this thing. We're gonna. Rob says, though, why don't you call the feds? We're gonna be calling a lot of people. So absolutely ridiculous. But I just continue to say, like, that's why we continue to tell you the upper echelon of the NYPD Internal Affairs Bureau are all still highly corrupted. They're just covering up. They're covering up for the machine.
As long as John Charles is there, I don't think that they will ever like seriously investigate it. And I think I have to wonder, at least, if it's because this all goes back to John Chell. And to what degree does it go back to John Chell is what keeps popping up in the back of my head, you know?
Remember that this all started when I invited him on the podcast. You remember that?
Yeah,
this all started. Like, all of a sudden CRTs, like, throwing out all these crazy claims. Next thing I know, a criminal's like threatening me. Then this kid starts threatening our children, and everybody's closely tied to each other. So I'm not, my personal opinion on the whole thing. My personal opinion on it is they're waiting for the statute of limitations to run out, and they're just playing games with us. That's all they're doing. They're trying to wait for the statute of limitations to run out on all of this, and that's what they're doing. And their investigation, I'll probably never get, because they'll keep hiding it unless there's a different mayoral administration. Then all you guys are gonna have a big problem. But if there's not, we'll see.
Well, I think even then, whoever comes on is just gonna want to quickly get rid of it, and they're never ever gonna really get to the bottom of this. And it's just a terrible state. You have to really wonder the mentality behind leadership to do that, because if I'm the boss and somebody tells me something like that is happening, you look to squash it quickly. You don't want the parasite to grow even bigger, and to create an atmosphere where stuff like this is okay, and yet what happened. It's you really have to wonder, like, what the mentality is behind this. And in particular, I'm thinking about Chell, like like I just can't understand, like, why anybody would like, anybody would let this fester and not like throwing this guy to the wolves immediately when that happened,
I mean, because it's a criminal enterprise, bro. You're covering up for your own. That's it, So fortunately, it is what it is, But don't worry, Sid Rosenberg says they're all great cops, so you should believe him. He got a good sergeant show today because he solved the sergeant contract.
Yeah.
Too funny, man. Watching these guys on the news every day, it's honestly it's heartbreaking to watch, and it just shows that the American media is captured whatever side of the aisle you're on. It's the independent reporters, it's the people that are out there just giving their opinions. Those are where you're going to get your news from today, because media is dying, and rightfully so. It should. It can't happen soon enough.
Yeah, I guess now that Sid has his pretend shield, he's not gonna ask for a follow-up to that question about the 12-hour tours. No, that's never going to be brought up again. Yeah.
Oh, he did.
He did?
So yeah. Someone sent it to me. So he asked, he said, oh, so whatever happened with the 12-hour tours? And the SBA president goes, oh, concessions had to be made. And he quickly got off of it. He was like, oh, concessions had to be made. Yeah, of course you got to make concessions, So they all got your best interest. They all back the blue all the time. Don't worry about it,
That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah. So if concessions were made, how is this a win? How is this a win? I mean, yeah, you got the money, but now you I mean,
could have had it 3 years ago. Same contract.
Yeah.
It's not the city one. They saved a ton of money in ITHP and all that stuff, and the sergeants lost out. They lost out on compounded interest. They lost out on all that stuff. And then the other question I think he asked, what was it? Oh, is this going to help retain sergeants and stop people from leaving and attract new candidates? Listen to Vinny's response. He was like, oh, he didn't want to give the same PBA response because they all know everybody's leaving. Nobody, has nothing to do with the money. They all know.
Yeah. No, it's gonna be worse. It's gonna be worse. One of the biggest complaints I hear about is guys tell me like they don't see their kids. Their kids are growing up and they don't see them. And how is this gonna help things? A lot of guys I speak to say they're leaving at 20. I mean, they say that they don't even have a plan, but they just know they want to leave at 20. And one of the reasons is because they don't see their kids. Yeah. How is this going to help them? How is this going to improve? It's not that hard to keep cops on the job. If guys were happy, I'm telling you, like, it would take 30 years for guys to leave. Because to be honest with you, most people don't want to leave and go have to start over. Even if they're making a little bit more money, it's humans like comfort, right? And if you're in your groove, you're in your career, you're happy, you have your schedule, you especially when you have kids and you have to your schedule, you have to have everything is scheduled, So if you're in your groove and you have your schedule, why would you want to disrupt it? And now you're starting over again. You're now at the bottom when it comes to getting time off. You have to prove yourself again, right? Most people don't want to do that. So all the job has to do is just make the job pleasant for cops. And I'm sorry, I know the job has like issues where it needs the 12 hours become more beneficial to them. But I'm sorry, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face, and it's like what's that phrase? Penny wise, pound foolish, I mean, you need to make the job, the quality of life on the job pleasant in order to keep these guys, because ultimately they're going to leave for reasons like this.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, police work's always brutal. The schedule's always been brutal. The scrutiny's always been brutal. But cops traditionally liked going to work and liked their job and stayed there, and they were comfortable in that this is my life. This is the life I chose, right? We used to laugh. I used to say that all the time. I used to tell my guy, this is the life we chose, like joking, And, I had great times. Great times. Yeah, I didn't see my kids much. I didn't see my wife much. I missed a lot of stuff that I wished I didn't. looking back, and I wished I was there for. But I think there is just a bad spirit on this department right now, and honestly, it all stems from the leadership, the politically appointed leadership, and the treatment from up top towards the cops. Like we said, Ray Kelly was basically like a micromanaging tyrant. He was a micromanaging tyrant, but nobody was leaving under that regime. Nobody was rushing out the door. Guys were staying 25, 30 years. The job was brutal. The schedules were brutal. You were micromanaged to an unbelievable level. But there was still this sense that of we will stand up for you. There was still a sense, there was still most of that sense that like we were the police department, we were a unit, we were a family, same way like your father would come in and discipline you and then give you a hug afterwards. That was kind of the Ray Kelly era. This era of policing is more like your father comes in drunk and beats you, leaves, blames all the problems of the household on you, and the next night comes back in drunk and beats you again. That's basically what this department went into. It went into, it went from it really being a respectable organization to it is no longer.
Yeah. I caution you guys who are you sergeants who are thrilled at this, at the money that you're getting at and the retro, because I was never a boss, but an example. Well, I keep thinking about this, right? I used to like do my regular tour, stay for overtime, basically overnight, and then go to paid detail in the morning, and then go home, sleep for maybe 3-4 hours, and then go back and do it again. And I would do that multiple times. And I was getting like 80 hours overtime and still maxing out my paid detail in that same month. And it came to a point where after a while, I was like, I remember standing in that TD Bank on Fulton Street, and I'm like, I don't think I could do this anymore. I'm like, I just, it was one of those 6-hour paid details. So those of you who don't know, paid detail is like, it's like the city kind of subcontracts you out to like a company, like mainly like banks, TD banks, or whichever other private business that needs additional security. So you're working for them for like 6 or 8 hours or even 12, and they give you a check. So this was an easy one. It was 6 hours. So in 6 hours, I could do like nothing. But I remember that 6 hours to me felt like it was 12 hours, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. The money's good, but I'm like, you know what? I'd rather be home right now, And after that, I was like, that's it for me. So my point is that at a certain point, it's like the money isn't worth it, and at a certain point, like this 12-hour tours for you guys is going to become 15 hours because we all know the work supervisors have to do post-tour and even pre-tour, and then your travel time. So now you're looking at a 15-hour workday. So again, in 2 or 3 years, when a lot of you are doing it, you're going to be looking back and like, I'm not sure this money was worth it, So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, So that's why I keep getting offered substantial jobs with substantial salaries, and I'm like, nah. And and I'm just like, freedom's a hard thing to give up, man. It really is. It's the money's. I chase money in my 44 years. I chase money, and like I think in the last year I stopped. And what a freedom it is! Like what a total difference it is in life and quality of life. And it's I'm not saying to be stupid. Like get your finances in order. Get your finances in order. But like money's not everything. Keep your lifestyle down. Great guy who's actually my SOL lieutenant coming in, Jimmy Downey. He was the one that convinced me to volunteer for Impact, which later got me sent out of the 120 precinct. But I was later a lieutenant with him. Great guy, and he always said, what his thing was, don't become an indentured servant. And what he meant by that was when you retire, and you retire with a significant pension, and a very low lifestyle, right? Jimmy drives a Hyundai that'll drive for 20 years, and the car costs $23,000, and he'll drive that and be happy. He's not fancy guy. He's not spending his money, and he has a lot of it because he's smart and he saves all his money. But what he says is, like, when you're at retirement, you shouldn't ever need to, like, oh, after I retire, I'm going to buy a house, or after I retire, then I'm going to make this money, and then I'm going to afford these things. What he's saying, well, at the point you're at retirement, you should already own your house, right? Your retirement pension check, whatever that be, it should already be able to cover your mortgage and your cost of living, right? And what you want to do is, if you want to go get another job, if you need to work because if you didn't do the 30 years or you didn't do the 35 years, and you didn't make a career out and you went and got a second job and you went and did other endeavors, what you don't want to do is then go make another salary and now bring your lifestyle up to this salary, right? Because guess what? You're never retiring now. He's like, so what you want to do is you want to retire here, you want your lifestyle here, and you want to keep your lifestyle here. And then if you make more money, great. But don't bring it into your lifestyle. Don't buy that big house. Don't go start driving fancy cars. If you didn't before, if you did before, good for you. You know what I mean? That's the way to do things. You know what I mean? And that's the important point to guys who retire young, right? And that's just the important point to anybody. If you're seeking retirement, I don't care what field you're in, keep your lifestyle low, right? Keep your lifestyle low. Don't make bad decisions. My wife's trying to pressure me into buying a $2 million house that's huge and it's beautiful, and we're basically going to be working to live for this house. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. It's stupid. I'm like, I could do whatever I want. I could travel wherever I want. We could do whatever we want. Why are we doing that? So what? So that someone could come to my house and be like, oh, wow. I'm like, nobody likes me anyway. Nobody's coming to visit you. Sorry. Like, you married the wrong guy. Your mother comes and spends time with us. She wants to leave as soon as she gets here. She doesn't want to hear me. So, I'm like, and that's just my thing. Don't get trapped into the game. So that was great advice. I'm gonna stay living that advice. I'm keeping my lifestyle low. I'm keeping my income here, and I'm gonna do whatever the hell I want.
Yeah. Quality of life, man. It's big. Like I look back and like you feel, whenever you have like a 3-day swing, like, and you really like I would take these road trips. I go upstate or I go down south and I come back, I'm like re-energized, I'm ready to go at it again, as opposed to if I just work the weekend away, so there's something about quality of life that and having time away, that's we can't dismiss it, because it'll make you, in a lot of ways, I think it'll make you a more productive cop, and that's something the job needs to understand. Guys working continuously around the clock are going to be less productive because they're going to be burnt out, and ultimately that they're going to displace that energy onto the public. So
yeah, and there was a pretty bad video. I think we all collabed on Instagram. Cop, I'm not going to play it here, but a cop, he was just getting basically verbally assaulted. Guy was in his face, telling him all this stuff, and everybody was beating the cop up. And I still say, I think I said, FYI, this guy should have been under arrest in 30 seconds, and he should have been. And at the end of the day, it's because I worry about your guy and girl's safety. I understand the threat that you guys are under politically, but you have to understand there's a threat politically you're under, there's a threat financially that you're under, and then there's a threat to your own life. And you should not let people get in your face like that and threaten you and come that close to you. I interact with everybody, all parts of the spectrum. People who hate the police, people who love the police, people who are in the middle. And I don't really see too many people that are going to have a problem with you putting that guy in handcuffs. And if they do, who cares? Who cares? But, the reason I'm bringing that up is because you're talking about being tired, right? You're talking about guys that are overworked and they're not ready to partake in doing their job because their real goal at that point is self-preservation, is getting home and getting to sleep. And the avoidance of an arrest, bad decisions are going to get made. People are going to get hurt. Cops are going to get hurt. Innocent people are going to get hurt. People that should have been arrested are not going to be arrested because people aren't in their right frame of mind. They're not feeling healthy. They're not thinking healthy. And you have to keep that in mind. These cops are not robots. Like that has to, and I think that's my last thing for today. Like that's it. They're not robots. Treat them like humans. Treat them like you treat the horses. Treat them like you treat the dogs, right? Treat them like you treat the drones. Treat them like they need rest and they need recharge and they need this. Treat humans like they're humans. How we haven't came up to what a human's capable of at this point in society just shows how dumb we all are. So, I mean, that's it. Treat your cops like you treat the animals. That's it.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely, bro. Yep.
Yeah. So, Snake Plissken says, can you go over what's going on with the frozen sergeant promotion and why that's happening and what happens to people on the list while they're waiting at the list expiration approaches? Some people say it had to do with the SBA contract negotiations with the city. Some people say PC froze promotions due to manpower concerns. There's no sense of when promotions will resume. Unfortunately, you see that, Vinny's going on this, Vinny Vallalong, the president of the SBA, he's going on this tour of, thanking the city. So I don't think that the city and the SBA are having any issues. I don't think they ever were. Like we said, this is a Pat Lynch strategy. This is a strategy to save people money, keep you out of contract. It saves the city millions of dollars over the course of the year. I think it's just the SBA's turn. That's all it was. They saved a significant amount of contract until it really looked bad. The gaslighting couldn't happen anymore. And then they settled. So I don't think it ever had anything to do with the contract or the SBA battling with the city. That never happened. I mean, anyone that buys that is ridiculous. The only people that ever battled with the city for the sergeants to get a contract was the finest Unfiltered. That was about it. Nobody else. And a couple of select sergeants out there who were pushing back. But when you talk about why they're not promoting sergeants, it has everything to do with the manpower crisis. They can't lose the cops. That's why they're not promoting sergeants. That's exactly what is happening. Just look at the promotions. There hasn't been sergeant promotions. And basically, what's going to happen is some sergeants that should have been a sergeant are going to die on the list. I recommend if you do die on the list, just sue like Eric Adams did to keep that list going and just say it's biased somehow. They don't like follically challenged people. They don't like guys that are married. They don't like Italians, whatever you want to say. Just do exactly what Eric Adams did when he scored low enough that he should have never been a captain and say they cut the list right before you because you're outspoken or because you one time commented on the finest Unfiltered and you too could rise to the rank of captain in the NYPD. So, I mean, that's what, that's what it is. And, it is what it is. You see the people leaving. I mean, you see the amount of sergeants they've been hiring in these last years, the amount of people they're allowing to be on the list by making these tests easier. It all has to do with manpower. They have proven themselves. Eric Adams has proven himself to be unable to recruit new talent and to retain experience. That's it. He failed miserably. Actually, he didn't fail. He met his campaign promise of when he said he was going to lower the NYPD head count, which he succeeded at. He was the king of the defund the police movement.
Yeah. Remember, I've speculated before, they want to get rid of tier 2 because you're more expensive for them to, their fixed costs are higher with you there. And again, Eric Adams has explicitly noted fixed costs before. And his intent on trying to cut costs and trying to defund the police. But is keep in mind that, again, the obvious, of course, is that the sergeants pull from patrol. And Jessica Tisch has said there's going to be 2,000 bodies for 2,000 cops for the Q teams plan. And where are they going to pull those cops from when precincts are already understaffed as it is? Now she's merging a lot of the functions, which are like the traffic cops and I think the youth officers getting rolled into that. I don't know how that works, because if you roll them into that function, then you're kind of taking away their precinct functions. But we'll see. But the point is that she needs to get 2,000 people into those teams, and she's got to put them somewhere. And again, if the tests are pulling from the patrol, then that means she has an even smaller pool to pick from. So it makes sense that they're going to freeze the sergeant's exam, and they don't want to promote as many sergeants anymore.
Yeah, I mean, all out's coming, right? All out's coming. It's May 15th to September 15th, right? Yeah. They want more cops on the street. They're not going to lose them. And Need says too many sergeants in rank, I believe. I believe there are 120 sergeants over. They should be 120. So they're of course they're over, because KB tells you why they're over. You have 10,000 fewer cops. You need X number of sergeants, right? Fewer sergeants, right? As the head count drops, guess what? So does the need for sergeants. So does the need for lieutenants. So does the need for captain. So this whole we're going to continue to do less with more is actually hurting all of you. And that's what we were telling you 3 years ago. I mean, that's what we were saying. Like, you can't let guys like Eric, myself, Sal, Marlon, all these people go for these arbitrary, ridiculous reasons and not stand up, because ultimately the alligator is going to come back and bite you in your own ass. You think it's benefiting you? Oh, John's out. Great. He would have scored higher than me on the captain's test. So he's gone. Awesome. One less guy I got to deal with. Everybody likes John. I don't got to deal with that guy no more. I don't got to worry about him. I'm going to get whatever I want that he doesn't get. He's not there. Nah, bro. You're just hurting yourself, dude. Get better. Get better. Don't wish for the downfall of the people in your own organization. And that's basically what happened the last 3 years. And I know a lot of people are happy when but it is what it is, bro. It is what it is. Like, this is what it is. And now it's coming back to bite you in the ass. I mean, for me, my class, we're over in 21 years now. So it's not really not affecting us as much, but you younger guys, it's going to affect you greatly. It's going to harm your ability to get promoted, all that. So, I mean, I would stray away from doing the test. I would kiss all the politicians' ass. I would drive them around. I would donate to their campaigns. I would see whoever you think is going to be the mayor. And hey, maybe one day you could be the deputy mayor of public safety.
Yeah. Well, here's what I bet is going to happen. There's even more room for that. Now, I'll tell you why. And I'm also responding to KB's comment in there. KB says, get rid of a few useless DI and empty spots. Well, here's the thing, KB. Here's the thing, right? I mean, they still have the rank, but think of it. When you look at all these protests happening and you're seeing lieutenants and DIs and inspectors and chief going hands-on, I mean, you might have still have the rank, but they've kind of diminished your rank because these white shirts are now getting hands-on. And years ago, I could have never, there were a few bosses who you knew would get down, like I always say, like, I've never seen like Chief Marino, would always. I remember as a impact rookie, right? We had to go to a funeral, right? And they were expecting retaliation at that funeral. And then Chief Marino just shows up, and he's just hanging out there with us. And so there are always the one or two bosses who are always in the mix, no matter what. But, you're seeing a systematic issue where all these white shirts are now in the mix and putting hands on and putting the cuffs on people themselves. And you never saw that before. And you're going to see that more and more because they're diminishing the rank because there's not enough manpower on the job. So yeah, they still have the rank, but they're doing stuff they didn't do before.
Snake Pliskin says, don't they have to extend the list expiration date for every month that they keep the promotions frozen? There's nothing official that says the promotion's frozen. They don't have to. What are you talking about? No, they don't have to. Absolutely not. I mean, maybe if they literally said, "Oh, we're not going to hire," like they came out and did like some type of order, then maybe, yeah. But Yeah, we never got down to that number. We didn't need it. They're not going to have to. They're not going to extend that list. I haven't seen them extend the list at all. So I mean, I don't think so. So yeah, but yeah, we're gonna actually have Chief Marino on here soon. We'll see.
Nice.
We'll pick a date. I want to see when Eric's good, when he's available. We'll get him on. Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to hear his take on like what's happening with New York City, you know, and the NYPD.
Yeah. You know what's funny, John? Like when I was I think I was 16, like I had a cousin that lived in Crown Heights. I lived in a 6-3, right? So I get off the subway and I'm walking to his building. It turns out his doorbell, right, was broken. So I'm ringing the doorbell. I'm standing in front there, and I'm like, "What's going on?" You know, we didn't have cell phones back then, so this was like the 90s, right? And then a patrol car comes by, and 2 white shirts get out, and they toss me. They're like, "What are you doing here? What's going on?" So they toss me. I'm like, "My cousin lives there." I rang the bell. I didn't know the bell wasn't working, right? So I think one of them was Chief Marino when he was in the 7-7. So I always think that's hilarious, you know?
Yeah.
But so I'm sure he wouldn't remember anything, right? But I'm like, I'm so sure that was Chief Marino. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I always think about that story when I think about Chief Marino. But like I said, Chief Marino was a good guy. Like he would show up at when he was like one of those chiefs where you knew when stuff went down, he would be in the trenches with us, you know. Now he got himself in a little trouble with the Schoolcraft thing, but I think I still believe that the job would have been better off to have still had him than to not, you know. So,
yeah. He was a good dude.
Yeah.
I remember one 4th of July. I think someone bounced on him, like they jumped out of a car. I think they had a ton of fireworks and they ran. And he didn't know where they went. They like went into, so he's like, so he called an 85. We went over there. I was doing crime, and he's like, "Oh, do me a favor, write that guy a parking summons." I was like, "Yeah, no problem." None of us have parkers, right? Like, so I'm like I'm calling, "Yo, get over here right now," you know, like, you know. And he's like, "What's the matter? Why aren't you writing them?" I was like, "No, we're gonna. You can leave. We'll take care of it. Don't worry about it." He's like, "What's the matter? You don't have parking summonses on you?" I was like, "Nah." He's like, he chewed us out a little bit and he left. He's like, "Bro, you gotta keep parkers on you." I was like, "I know." I was like, "You're 100% right, Chief." But he didn't make a big deal of it at all. You know, we wrote the guy summons like a few minutes later, and that was it. You know, and I think we wound up shutting the block down after that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. I had so many different 4th of July experiences, but he was like cool. He wasn't like mad about it, and he knew exactly that we didn't have it because, you know, he probably didn't have them either way. So it was funny. Yeah. So all right, guys. All right, yeah. I think that's it. Anything before we get out of here, Marlon? We went super long today, bro.
Yeah. No. You know, guys, just just keep you know, Derek and the Dim family in your thoughts and prayers again, you know. And you know, if things are rough for you, you know, just get outside and take a walk, you know, because it's getting summertime now in New York and the weather is really nice outside, you know. So sometimes you know, that sunlight, like when just after the job it got rid of me, like and I was in Florida, like that sunlight and just taking a walk outside really did wonders for me. So, you know, in these rough times, you know, when there's a lot of sadness around us, it's good to like just get outside and get some fresh air and get some sunlight. So
nah, I agree, man. I agree. So yeah, prayers to Eric and the Dim family. For Derek, we're praying for him. We're praying for a miracle. So appreciate you guys. We had about 500 people on here this morning and Friday. Hope everybody has a great, safe weekend. And we'll be back at you Monday live 8:05.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.